Okay, we are live right now. Let me just post this here on Twitter. Okay, okay. There we go. Okay, that's that. Okay. Okay, hello, how's everyone doing? I'm feeling a little bit better, guys. Better than last time. I'm still a little sick. Okay, let me see here. Hey guys, how's everyone doing? Okay, just, and we'll do the Saints Row 2 stream on Tuesday, so I'm definitely feeling a little bit better. And, by Tuesday, I should be, completely healthy. It's not COVID what I have, in case anybody's wondering, but I think it's the flu. Hello, hey guys, hey everyone. Hello, Mark, Goat, April, Barrett, Francisco, Drift, hello everyone. Thank you, AJ. Thank you, Thank you everybody who's wished me good health. Thank you guys. You guys are awesome. Hello, Jolly. Do you have a headache? No, not at all. I just feel very stuffy and just like a little nauseous. Hey Pro, love your videos. Thank you, Thomas. Thanks for the Thank you, man. Thank you for the thank you for the super chat. Thanks, man. Okay, if anybody needs help selling anything, just send me an invite. I'll help you out. If nobody needs help selling anything, then I'll just sell some of my own stuff. Hope you feel better, bro. Thank you, Lewis. Thanks, man. Thank you for sponsoring my channel again. Thanks, Lewis. I have a massive headache right now. I hope you feel better, Agent. Hey, Pro, how are you? I'm feeling a little better. Have you eaten anything today? Oh, yeah. I had, for breakfast, I had, sausage, a sausage and, a cheese sandwich, and, for dinner, I had some baked beans, so it was, I'll probably have something after the stream again, so it's, which is better, MC President or CEO? CEO I'd say is more solo friendly, but MC, is better as a group. But both of them are good. I think it's best if you combine both of them, both CEO and MC. What do you play on the PS5? Have I gotten 100% completion in San Andreas? No, I haven't. But I will. Anyone need help selling anything? If not, I'm just gonna start selling some of my own stuff then. Let me go to my arcade then. I'll probably check up on everything there. When's your new money guide? The money guide will probably come out sometime in December, because my next video, because I have a lore video coming out this Tuesday, and this Tuesday, it's a GTA 5 lore video. The GTA 5 lore video that I have coming out this Tuesday, I don't want to ruin the surprise. It's going to be a very unique video. It's going to be covering a specific topic that I haven't seen any other YouTuber cover. It's regards to the story in GTA 5. It's very unique. It's going to be very detailed. It's been something that I've been working on for some time. And that'll be up on Tuesday. This isn't the Trevor and Frank and Michael video, for people wondering. The Trevor and Michael video will be next. So right after this is uploaded, I'm gonna start working immediately on the Trevor and Michael lore video. Ever played the Stalker games? I've played some of them before, but I've never really been into them. Thank you, Third Street, for the super chat. Thanks, man. Oh, Bunker invite? Okay. Oh, wait. Let me see here. What do I... Okay, Bunker. I'm on PlayStation 5. Bro, will you play The Devil in Me? Yes, we'll play that. Sometime in December we'll play that. Why don't I play God of War? I'm just not into, into those type of games. Yeah, I wish you could just start MC contracts in the menu. I don't like calling Malik and stuff like that. That'd be a nice thing. I don't like I don't like going back to the clubhouse each time. Oh, we have the hard one. Oh, whatever. Wait, Trio, you invited more people, right? Okay, there is more people. Okay. Are you a Metal Gear fan? Not really. I played some of the games, but I'm not really into them. You feeling better? I'm feeling better than the other day. But I'm still a little messed up. Thank you for asking, though. Will I ever do GTA Chinatown Wars? Yes. Yes, I will do GTA Chinatown Wars. That I have planned. LA Noire, yeah, I'll play that one day. It's just with LA Noire, I already know who all the killers are, so it wouldn't be, I'd say, that fun of a playthrough to do, but I'll still do it one day. What do you think a Game of the Year will be? Game of the Year is probably going to be either Modern Warfare 2 or God of War. But for me personally, my Game of the Year is probably a Game of the Year that a lot of people aren't gonna, choose, and my Game of the Year is Sniper Elite 5. That's my Game of the Year. Hey, I hope you feel better. Take a break if you need to. Thank you, Lopez. Thanks, man. I feel a little better, so I wanted to do a stream tonight. Well, if I play LA Noire, what I would probably do is I would probably comment a lot on the game, and I would probably talk about what's realistic and what's unrealistic, you know, compared to Law Enforcement. Because there are some really unrealistic stuff in LA Noire. Oh, this drop was far, yeah. First one. Is this the most dead GTA has been? No. The most dead that GTA has been was probably in 2014, early 2014. Early 2014, the game really didn't have that much content. There was really not much to do. But watch, when Rockstar puts out another update next month, like, there's probably gonna be an update in like 2 or 3 weeks on this game. And so, when Rockstar puts out another update in December, you're gonna see a lot of players get back on this game. And when I make like GTA Online videos, they're probably gonna be very popular when I make the videos on the new DLC, whatever that is. So, like, you know, people take a break from GTA, but they come back to it when a new update comes out, and that's when a lot of activity starts happening in the games. Usually, the activity on Grand Theft Auto dies down in between, like, updates, because, like, you know, the first month or two after an update, it's popular, but then afterwards kind of dies down, because people get bored and they're waiting for the next update. Sorry, guys, I'm just blowing my nose so much, I'm just still a little sick. Thoughts in the World Cup? Not much personally into it. I know where the next drop is, so after you guys make that drop, just follow me. I know where the next one is. What about the Call of Duty seasons? What about them? You mean, am I gonna stream them? I'll probably do a stream of... I want to do a stream of the new season of Call of Duty. I just haven't gotten around to it. The next, drop is gonna be right here. Thank you, Davey, King, thank you for the super chat. Thanks, man. And thank you, Victor. Is that Brazilian money, by the way? Thank you, Victor Martinez. I just had a customer angrily accuse me of taking a shopping cart, even though I tried my best to explain. Customers are known to take other people's carts if there's barely anything. Retail sucks. Yeah. Oh yeah. People are, people in, customers can be very unreasonable, and, I'll tell you this, Victor, working in retail has completely changed my worldview and stuff, because before I started working in retail, I never in my life imagined, that somebody could, make such a big deal and freak out over something so stupid and so insignificant, like, just a $1 coupon or something like that. I didn't think, I guess I was naive, and I didn't think that people would, freak out over something so stupid and insignificant, but when I started working in retail, boy, was I wrong. I realized how much people complain, and people complain a lot. And not only do they complain, but they complain about really dumb things. Really, really, really stupid things. Drive over here. Who is that? Venge, just drive over here. Come over to us. Just bring all the enemies over here. But about shopping carts, I'll tell you something about shopping carts. There was a highway that was pretty close to the store that I worked at. And so what happened was customers would take the shopping carts and just push them. I don't know why they took them so far, but they'd take them to the highway. And they would leave them near the ramp of the highway. And so I had to cross near the ramp. Like, not in the highway, but like right when the ramp starts. I had to cross through that to get the carts a lot of times. And that was scary because of all the traffic and all the cars rushing through. And it was just, I don't know why people would always take the carts so far. Were you happy with the Mark II nerf? It's better than nothing, but I think more should have been done. I'm hooking up my new controller, other one died. Okay, Eric. Reminds me of all those stories you told about how at your old retail job they tried to make you a manager of all the responsibilities, but it was only a 25-cent raise. Not worth it, lol. Well, in my store, it was like about a $1 to $2 raise. Most of the time, it was a little bit over $1 for, like, if you were going to be promoted to, a supervisor. But, and that's what I'll tell you guys, is that be careful at jobs. There's jobs that try to pull almost like a scam in a way. And retail places are known for this very commonly, where retail places will try to promote you very quickly. And so you'll be there for maybe just a few months, maybe a year, and they will try to promote you to supervisor really quickly, like just being there for such a short time. And so a lot of people jump on that, and they say, oh, promotion, I get promoted to supervisor, and they just, they accept it right away. But the reason that I say it's a scam is because when you get promoted in a retail environment, typically to a supervisor, what happens is you get a very small raise. Like in my place, it was like $1 to $2, for being a supervisor. And it's some places pay more than others, but most places it was around there. And the reason that this is a scam is because you get paid an extra $1 to $2 more an hour, but for that extra $1 to $2 an hour, you get so much responsibility thrown on you. So previously, when you're just a store associate, you're responsible for generally, like, cleanliness around the store, if you're on the floor, and unpacking. If you're on the register, you're just responsible for the register most of the time. But if you're a supervisor, you are responsible for opening and closing the store. You're responsible for, oh man, this is annoying with this car. You're responsible for counting the money in the store. You're responsible for dealing with any customer complaints directly. You're responsible for dealing with corporate, if any of them come to the store. You're responsible for managing truck nights, truck deliveries. You're responsible for getting all the tasks done, and also getting your associates to do those tasks on the list. And if they don't do the tasks on your list, you get yelled at by the management. And so, basically, the point that I'm making is the reason that I see it as a scam is because for just an extra $1 to $2 an hour, you get all this extra work thrown on you. and I personally don't think that that's worth it. That basically, like, at my store where I work, they tried to promote me to supervisor several times. Several times. They tried to get me to take a supervisor position, but I just kept saying no. The reason I kept saying no, they were getting frustrated that I wasn't taking it. They wanted me to take it, but I kept saying no. I just stayed as like a store associate the whole time, and it was because I saw what the other supervisors had to go through, what they had to deal with, and I was like, no, I'm not doing that. No, thank you. It's like, you know, if you want me to deal with all that extra stuff, you know, pay me an extra $5 an hour. You can't expect to pay me an extra $1 to $2 an hour and expect me to run the store when the manager is absent. So you expect me to run a store that makes thousands of dollars a day, and you're gonna you know, pay me just $1 or $2 more an hour to deal with all the crap that happens in that store in a day? No, thank you. You know, my store had hundreds of customers in a day, hundreds. And I'm not gonna run the whole store. Like one supervisor would run the whole store and the manager's not there. I'm not gonna run the whole store for, you know, $1 over minimum wage. No, thank you. So that's why I personally consider it a scam. When these companies, you know, they try to promote you so quickly to a supervisor, and they try to get you to do all this extra work for just a small, you know, amount. If you're gonna promote somebody to supervisor, you know, to step up, you know, that should be at least 1/3 of what they make an hour extra. So, you know, if somebody is making, you know, $10 an hour, you know, then give them, you know, an extra $5 an hour. You know, if somebody's making, you know, $20 an hour, give them like $28 an hour, or $30 an hour for being a supervisor. You know, it shouldn't be that, you know, that it's just like $1 or $2 an hour for being a supervisor. That makes no sense to me. You know, I just find it ridiculous how, like, somebody who runs a store that makes thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, like a really, like, big store, and that person is just making a little bit above minimum wage. Like, how is that possible? For me, I don't understand that personally. So, that's basically my warning to people, is that if you work in a retail environment, and this also applies to food. So, oh, what the? Oh, great! I didn't think the damn train blew me up. I didn't even realize that could blow up an Insurgent. That small little tram. That's stupid. But I'm sorry, Trio. I messed up on that. Yeah, wow. But what I was basically saying was, yeah, that train is really slow, so I didn't think it could blow up an Insurgent like that. Like, I didn't think that could happen. Yeah, I was just, yeah, I'll probably upload that as a short, later on. It'll probably turn into a short, but, I didn't even realize that yeah, that the tram can do that much damage to you. I feel a little better, thank you for asking, Rogan. But yeah, like I said, guys, you know, if you're working in the food industry, like fast food, or you're working in retail, and they try to promote you, like, really quickly, that's like a sign of that's the promotion scam is what I call it. You know, be careful for that. Don't take the promotion, because it's not worth it. If they want to promote you, ask them what the wage is going to be. They tell you like $1 or $2 an hour for being a supervisor, say no. Because I'm telling you, me personally, I'd rather make $1 or $2 less an hour and not have to deal with all this stress. So that's just the way I see it, personally. And honestly, what I'll say is that the, you know, sometimes the retail places, like, you know, when I worked there, it honestly reminded me a bit of communism. And, you know, people might say, like, you know, how does that make any sense? The reason it reminds me a bit of communism is because in a retail environment, you know, typically, like, you know, the associates just make a little bit above minimum wage regardless of what their responsibilities are. So some people have way more responsibility than others, and they still make pretty much very close to the same wage. Very, very close. And, basically how it worked in a communist country, if you did a little bit of extra work, you would get, like, a little, like, extra ration card, you would get a little bit of a bonus for, like, more groceries and stuff like that. But it was mostly nonsense. And so that's personally what it reminds me of, a bit. That's the system my parents grew up under, so that's, you know, that's what working in a retail environment actually, at least for me, in my opinion, kind of reminds me of. At least everyone gets a job with communism. Sure, everyone might get a job, but people are going to get crappy jobs, and also people are not going to want to advance. People are not going to want to, you know, people are not going to want to advance their career or do anything, you know, do anything more worthwhile. Bro, you missed 3rd Street super chats. Oh, thank you, Edgy, for, thank you for the super chat. I'll check. Have you been to New York City? If so, is it safe to visit? I grew up in New York City. It depends on where you go. Most places are, you know, safe areas. Like, a lot of people think that the Bronx, like, is like a really dangerous place, where the Bronx is, like, some parts of it are more dangerous than others, but the Bronx is a lot more safe than what it used to be. Like, in the 90s, the Bronx was, some parts, like the South Bronx, was really dangerous, but, like, today it's not as bad. Like, there are some bad areas, but it's, you know, not that bad. But the thing is, though, is the biggest, you know what the biggest, if you visit New York City, do you know what crime you are the most likely to be a victim of? It's not even, like, you know, a robbery. Like, people think the most common, like, crime is, like, that a gang member is gonna walk up to you and just rob you. You know, that can happen, sure, but the most common crime that's gonna happen to you if you're visiting New York is that you're gonna be a victim of theft. Basically, what's gonna happen is that if you leave your bag on, like, a bench just for a minute and you step away, it's gonna get taken. Like, a lot, if it's in a very public place, like Manhattan, like, it's gonna get taken. Like, it's like when I was at Coney Island, remember, last year when I was at Coney Island for that video, I made, if I went to the bathroom in Coney Island and I just left, like, my bag on the bench and I got back, it'd be gone. So that's, you know, that's the most common crime. You leave anything on the subway, it's gonna be gone. So that's, like, you know, that's the most common thing, is, you know, people are gonna take stuff from you. There's a big difference between theft and robbery. People think that theft and robbery is the same thing. Theft is basically when they take it without physical force. So that you basically, theft is when they take something without you realizing it. Robbery is when they take something from you by force, which is much worse. Oh, congratulations, man, he hit 2 billion. But what I was saying earlier about, you know, communism, and, like, one person said that everyone under communism has a job. Sure, everyone might have a job under communism, but it's not going to be good jobs, and it's not going to be good paying jobs. Like, you know, there's no point to advancement. Well, there's no point in working, like, you know, harder or anything like that. And when you bring this up to communists, when you tell communists, like, you know, what's the point of advancing if you all make the same money? And communists, their general response is, it's for the good of society. It's for the good of community. That's why you want to advance. You want to work hard for the good of society and the good of community. That's typically their response. And sure, you know, people want to help their community, but people also care about themselves. And so nobody is going to, you know, want to put an extra amount of work and labor on themselves if they're not getting rewarded. If I, you know, go above and beyond, and I literally make the exact same amount of money as somebody who doesn't go above and beyond, then what's the point of going above and beyond? That's why you have quiet quitting. Quiet quitting in a workplace, that's basically quiet quitting. What it basically is, people think it's laziness, but it's not. It's basically when you just do what your job description tells you to do. So when your job description tells you, you follow the job description, you do what the job description tells you to do. But you don't do anything more than that. And the reason people do that is it's basically a way to protest without getting fired against your wage. So if you're going above and beyond, and you're working really hard for your boss, you're doing tasks you're not supposed to do, and your boss doesn't reward you for it, then you just basically quiet quit, which basically means you do just your assigned duties. So an example of that, if I work in retail, an example of quiet quitting might be that I do all my tasks in a day, but I'm not going to go the extra mile to, like, you know, to clean up an area that I'm not assigned to. I'm not going to go the extra mile to do, like, a specific task that I wasn't supposed to do, that it wasn't on the list for me to do. So that's basically what it is. But, well, somebody made a super chat, but they deleted it. Well, thank you for that. Yeah, that's pretty much what it is. And it's like, you know, what I was saying about, you know, communism before is, like, people don't understand that, you know, humans are driven by advancement, and humans are driven by, they want rewards, you know, like, look at even children, like, even kids when growing up. Why do kids behave a lot of times? Kids behave because they're taught to behave by their parents. But what happens when kids behave, though, a lot of times? When they get good test scores, what happens? The parents reward them. They buy them toys, they might take them to the movies. And so that encourages kids to do better in school, and encourages kids to, to act normally, not, you know, be bad kids. And, you know, I know it's not all about reward. I know, you know, kids, you know, learn, you know, right from wrong. What I'm saying is it's human nature. You want to do something that's going to reward you, and you go the extra mile because you're expected a reward. And what I was saying before earlier, when I compare retail to communism, the reason I compare that, it's the jobs. It's not the company. No, I know the company makes a lot of money, but I'm talking with the job description. When everybody in the retail environment, everyone in the store, is making the exact same wage, like almost close to the exact same wage. And so you have like a cashier and a supervisor. The cashier is just on the register. That's all they're doing. The supervisor has to run around the store, deal with customer complaints, get all the tasks done, count the money, open and close the store, and the supervisor's only making $1 more than the cashier. And yet does, like, 5 times more work. So for me, that's personally, at least that's comparable to communism, because there's no incentive to, want to become a supervisor. There's no incentive for that, because everyone's almost making the exact same wage, and yet you're doing the extra work. That's pretty much what it is. And and I'll tell you, my parents grew up in a communist country. They told me like a lot of the stuff that went on, and like I just personally find it stupid, the communist argument, when people say that, like, when you bring this up to them and you say to them, why don't you, why should you work harder? Why should you advance your career? If you're going to make the same amount of money as you did previously. And communists always say the exact same thing. They say, it's good for the community, it's good for everyone else when you work harder. That's just it. That's always their response. It's never, we're going to give you an extra reward or anything like that. It's always good for the community. But like I said, humans are driven by a want of a reward. They want a reward. They want to be rewarded. There's incentive for that. And if you don't give incentives, people aren't going to work harder. In my parents' country of Poland, for instance, the communist farms, basically they would give you a task and they would say, like, make this amount of like crops in like a day or something like that. And so do you know what people would do? People would get the amount of crops they had to do on the list. They would pack them all up, and then they had nothing left to do. And then they would just sleep in the fields. That's what people would do, because they still had plenty of time. They could have harvested more crops, but they didn't do anything else because there wasn't going to be an extra reward for it. So why should they? So that's like that my parents told me about stories that happened when they were growing up. So that's like that's it. It's like people don't understand what drives innovation, what drives like it's a desire to advance, it's a desire to get a reward and stuff like that. You can look at a game like GTA. Even GTA Online shows us this. Like, why do people grind Cayo Perico? Why is Cayo Perico like the most grinded thing? Because Cayo Perico gives you the greatest reward with the least amount of effort. But if you look at something like Arena Wars, you put so much work into it. There's so much work into Arena Wars. You work so hard on it. You have to customize these vehicles, spend so much in the workshop. You have to compete against other players, and then you barely make anything. And so people don't do Arena Wars. They do Cayo Perico because they know the rewards are there, and they know they make money. That's why Arena Wars is dead, and Cayo Perico is popular. It's it's a desire for reward that drives innovation, and that's what people don't understand. And it's like my teacher, like in my teacher in college, he said this like several times. He always said that he said that capitalism is not a perfect system. There's a lot of really stupid things in capitalism. I know there's greedy corporations that screw people over. I know that happens. But he always said that that capitalism, even though it's not the best, not the best thing, it's still better than everything else that's been proposed. So that's just it. But enough of that. About that. Let's deliver these weapons here. Oh, it's in here. Okay, perfect. There we go. Let me see here. Hey Pro, I love your content, especially the lore videos you make along with the cosplays. Thank you, Hans. Thank you, man. Well, what I will say though is, and here's a fun fact. Here's a fun fact that a lot of people don't know about. And for people who don't believe me about this, you can Google this, and you can find out that both of these statements that I'm going to make are true. But in virtually every single communist country that existed on this planet, almost every single communist country, everyone from the Soviet Union, North Korea, China, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Cuba, Poland, Czechoslovakia, pretty much every communist country that you can think of. Do you know what was illegal in those countries, but was actually legal in capitalist countries? The right to strike. People actually don't know that. In a communist country, strikes were forbidden. They were illegal. If you went on strike in a communist country, you'd get arrested. The government would come and take you away. That would happen. People don't know that. A lot of people don't know that. And it's what I find that personally so strange that like so many people that think that communism is a good idea, when they see strikes happening, they're saying, oh, you know, the strike is a good thing, you know, people are standing up for their rights. And don't get me wrong, I'm perfectly fine with strikes. I support the right to strike. Strike is a basic, you know, worker's right. It is. But the point that I'm making is that in all communist countries, strikes were illegal. They were banned. You get arrested. At least in Western capitalist countries, you can strike. You might get fired depending on what job you have, but the government's not going to come in a van and take you away. And so people don't know that. They don't know that. They don't know. And the second thing that people don't know is they don't know that in virtually every single communist country, do you know what else was illegal? Unions. Unions were not legal in communist countries. Every single communist country banned unions. They weren't there. Workers' rights unions. They didn't exist. In communist countries, they had something called the government union, which the government union is a big joke. Like, you look at a country like China, for instance, China only has one union, the government union, and the government union is a big joke. You know, you have people working in sweatshops in China. You know, what is the government union doing for those workers? Nothing. So that's like, and if people try to form their own private union, they get arrested. That's what happens in China. And so people don't know about this. You know, people that support communism don't know that in all communist countries, unions and strikes are illegal. And the communist government, when their response for this, why strikes and unions are illegal, they claim that the government that's in power is for the workers. So they say strikes aren't necessary. We represent you, the workers. And they say unions aren't necessary. We represent you, the workers. And, you know, leave it to the government, right? You know, the government's going to get everything done, right? It's just, you know, no. So it's just that. So, you know, look that up if you don't believe me. Just Google it. Are strikes legal in communist countries? And you'll see every single communist country is illegal. And people do not know that. It's a very interesting fact that people don't know about. I think that a lot of the people that think communism is a good idea, when they actually knew those facts about it, I think they changed their mind. Hey, I work at a retail. One of my managers made a 3-month pregnant woman work against her will and made her lift heavy boxes. She had 2 strokes at work. What? I hope that she sued the hell out of that boss. That's illegal. So that's like, you know, I hope that your coworker sued the hell out of that boss. I really hope, I really hope she did. Feel really bad for your coworker there. I had gotten hurt once at work. When I was at work, you know, a few years ago, I was working a night shift. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. My coworker was rushing on the conveyor belt in the basement because we had a conveyor belt where we send the overstock downstairs. My coworker was rushing, and I literally, I was telling him that time, don't rush. He was rushing. And so what he had was those, you know, the U-boat things, you know, the things you push, you know, that you would have the stock on. The big U thing, like that big metal steel thing that's on it, basically, we would take those out and send them down. And so that thing had to be, you know, what, 30, 40 pounds? Possibly 50 pounds? He dropped that on my foot. He did. And when he dropped that on my foot, I was pissed off. I was pissed. It hurt like hell. I was pissed, and what happened was I yelled at him, and he said, "I don't understand why you're yelling at me, Patrick." That's what he said. So that was just, you know, what my stupid coworker did. And what happened was, when I got back home, and I took my shoe off, my whole sock was red. And I took off my sock, and my foot was bloody. And what ended up happening was, I cleaned up my foot, you know, everything like that. I went to sleep. And then actually, when I woke up, like, you know, it was either the next day or the day after. Do you know what actually happened? When I was actually walking, it's like even though it hit the bottom of my foot, it was like my whole leg wasn't there. And so when I was walking, like, I could walk, but it's like I didn't feel my leg. It's like it wasn't there. Like, I would hit my leg and I would feel nothing. Like, it was just, there was no feeling whatsoever to it. And it scared me. And so, you know, I ended up going to a doctor, and I got an x-ray, and it took up my whole Friday afternoon. My Friday afternoon, I was actually supposed to have off. Took up my whole Friday afternoon. I went to actually the x-ray department. I went to the x-ray department at 5 p.m. They scheduled me for a 5 p.m. thing. And then I went in there, and they said, the x-ray department is closed. And I'm like, why did you schedule me for 5 p.m. if the x-ray department is closed? They chose the time, not me. And then I went to a second doctor across town. He was still open. You know, they looked at it, and then they got back to me. He gave me, like, a little cast to put on. And he got back to me. Like 2 or 3 days later, he told me that my foot was not broken. There was nothing broken. He just said it was badly bruised. It's a miracle that nothing was broken. And when I actually ended up asking my doctor, like, why I don't feel anything in my leg, he said that it's probably your nerves acting up, because you never really had felt pain, like that, at least in your foot and your leg. But what happened was, a few days afterwards, I was able to feel everything again. So it was like, I'm able to feel everything again. I'll hit my leg and it'll hurt again. I was able to feel everything again. But, that personally scared me. My coworker who actually ended up hurting me, when my boss actually came in, because I had left like 30 minutes before. My boss came in. My boss said, did everything go good tonight? And my coworker actually told my boss, yeah, everything went fine. And then, like, I told my boss, like, when I came in, like, to work, like, I came into work a few days later, like, he was just, like, it's like he didn't know what was going on. And I told him, I'm like, you do realize that guy hurt me, like, the other day? He's like, he did what? Yeah, he hurt me. And so he actually got written up for that. So my coworker got a write-up for that. And then he ended up actually apologizing to me. And it actually pissed me off a bit, because all my coworkers actually texted me asking me if I was okay. But that one coworker who hurt me never asked me if I was okay. Never did. And so that just personally irritated me. And I would have accepted his apology if he was actually sincere and he did apologize. I would have accepted it. I'm a forgiving guy. But it was just I had some people telling me at my job that I was eligible for like workman's comp or something like that. I didn't know about what that was at the time, because I was just like a naive kid at the time. I missed the drop, but maybe I could have taken it, but I didn't end up taking it, and I just left it as it is, and so was just that. But yeah, that's pretty much the story. That's really the only time I actually got hurt at work. I did get hurt one other time. It wasn't that major. Basically, I remember he threw something down the conveyor belt to the basement, and it hit me in the face. It wasn't heavy. It just hurt, but that's the only other time I got hurt. But that wasn't like as bad as the foot incident. It was the same guy too. But it was yeah, that. And I don't even want anyone to get fired over like stuff like that. But I want people to take responsibility and like at least apologize. You hurt somebody, you apologize and you make it up to that person. You do something. You give them a gift. You cover a shift for them. You buy them dinner, something to make up for that, but not like that. But it's just that was just the time I got hurt at work. And but I'm sorry that your coworker went through. Can you sue him for that? I don't know. I don't know much about like I actually don't know much about lawsuits. I know way more about criminal law. Lawsuits I don't know that much about. I know a little bit about lawsuits, but I don't know if I could really sue for that. But the thing is, though, I wouldn't have even wanted to sue him because he was not rich. In fact, he was he was just like a working class guy, and so he had personal problems with his family. He had stuff going on with his family, and I'm not that type of person. I'm not going to sue over something like that. So it just no, I wouldn't do that. But all I basically wanted, that's all I wanted, was just an apology. That's it. I didn't want anybody to get fired. I didn't even want him to get written up. I just wanted an apology. That was it. He did end up apologizing to me later on, but I don't know if that was coerced or not by the management. So that's just that was just a story I got. This happened like many years ago. I don't even know if he's still working there, but that was just That's why I'm a security guard, LOL. Good money for the least amount of work. I make more than I did in retail, and I don't even do a tenth of the work. Yep. Yeah, security can be a pretty chill job, especially the night shifts. If you're a security guard working a night shift, it's so quiet. Like, you don't have to deal with anybody at all. Barely anybody. If something does happen, no, you'd have to deal with it, obviously. But, typically nothing bad is going to happen. And so it's very chill, just sit there, relax, maybe watch a few cameras, walk around the building. It's, yeah, security work, I would say is way superior to, like, retail work, definitely. Okay, get this here. Favorite original heist, big fan. Pacific Standard. I just like the bank robbery. It's not even about the money. I just like the old-fashioned bank robbery style. Thank you for that super chat, Lenley? I have a question about China. Do all triads work for the CCP, or is there some that are against them? Oh, well, a lot of the triads actually come from Hong Kong. So a lot of the triads are not from actually mainland China. They're instead from Hong Kong. Like Woozie is not from mainland China in GTA San Andreas. Woozie is from Hong Kong, or he could be born in America. I don't know where Woozie is born, but he's descended at least from Hong Kong triads. The Hong Kong triads are the ones that he's involved with. That there are other triads that actually are involved with the Chinese government, and there's a lot of corruption in regard to this. The GTA 4 triads, the ones that Johnny tries to give the heroin back to, they're actually involved with the Communist Party of China. They even admit to it. So there's that cutscene in the Ballad of Gay Tony when Billy Gray is talking to the triads. And then and then one of the triads says that like capitalism is a failed system, and then he says that he forgot that they were commies, and then he makes like a racist remark, and then the triads just talk about that. But that's basically it. So the triads in like GTA 4 are mainland Chinese triads, where the triads in San Andreas are Hong Kong triads. Thank you, Third Street, for the super chat. Hello, professional everyone. Hope you're doing well. Thank you, Aussie guy. Thank you, Sad. You retracted your super chat. I broke my thumb once at work, and my boss said I faked it, even though went to the hospital, had proof, cast, called my boss, oh, okay, I see.
Okay,
and we have we have free healthcare in Canada, so I'm gonna use it, and because no HR. Well, I'm sorry that happened to you, I'm sorry that happened to you, Bester. Oh no, post-op ban's great. Do you know what actually happened was, my coworker, she told me this story once about when she was actually in the hospital. I don't remember what she was in for the hospital, but she was in the hospital. She was fine, ended up being fine. But it was another retail company, because she worked for another company before she worked for my company. And she told me how basically they asked her to cover a shift that she wasn't even supposed to be working. It was her day off, and she said that she's in the hospital, and they texted her saying, no, you're a liar. So they actually texted her that, which I don't even know what that's going to accomplish. Even if the person was lying, like, what is just saying, texting them back, you're lying, like, what is that going to do? Like, is that somehow going to convince them to come into work for you? But she got really pissed off, and what she did was she actually took a selfie of herself in the hospital bed and sent it back to her supervisor. So that's what my coworker ended up doing. But, yeah. There's, here's the thing is, I'll tell you guys this. Retail places, like a lot of these retail companies, they don't care at all about your health. At all. Zero. And they will, they will basically they will pay you just a little bit above minimum wage, and they will basically work you as much as they can. So just keep that in mind. Because a lot of the health problems that you can have working in a retail place, it's not going to be, getting physically hurt typically like in a factory. That can happen to you. Sure, you can get physically hurt. But most of the health problems that you're going to have in a place like retail is something that builds up over time. It's going to be like lifting stuff. You're bending down your back. I don't know if I have permanent back damage because of that. I hope I don't. But, yeah, sorry if I'm still a little slow. I'm still a little sick. But that's where a lot of your health issues are going to come from in a place like retail. And these companies don't care at all about you. So just keep that in mind. Like, if they're asking you to do something ridiculous that is not good for your health, like, lifting something ridiculous and, like, bending down your back, you ask yourself this: is this worth my health? And also, is this worth the wage that I'm getting paid for this? You ask yourself that. That's two important, like, questions, because when I was, like, when I was, like, a much younger kid and I worked in these environments, I was very naive, and so whatever they told me to do, I'd do it. It didn't matter how unreasonable it was, how stupid it was, I would still do it. And so I'd clean up other people's messes, too. And so it was like, tasks that people messed up, tasks that people didn't get done right. And so I'd be responsible for cleaning up their mess and dealing with their stuff. And so it wasn't good. I did a Pacific Standard with Gilly about a week ago. It was a lot of fun, and we had an embarrassing fail where a helicopter EMP chopped us up. Oh, is that on stream by any chance, Mario? I'd love to see that clip. But, thank you for the super chat. I saw, you know, the Valkyrie helicopter crash once in the Humane Labs. That was probably the funniest, like, fail I've had. I've seen it just crash into the water. Thank you, Mario. Hey, any chance I could join your session? My PSN is, Oh, thank you, Nick, for the super chat. Do I have you added, Nick? If you have me added, then you can just join me through the, you can just join me through the friends list. If not, I would have to add you next time. And then you can come on the next stream. Because it's like, I don't want to show my friends list on the stream because then griefers see who I have added and they, and I would also have to delete somebody right now. It's because my friends list is full. But I only delete people who are offline for like over a year. So I don't delete, you know, people for no reason. But I delete people that are offline typically for a year and people who, you know, do something bad. So if somebody does something bad, then I delete them. But usually I don't delete people, you know, usually very rarely does somebody do something bad. But it does happen sometimes. But yeah, you know, keep that in mind that, like, you know, these retail places, they don't care about your health at all. They don't. So it's just, you know, maybe you're, if anything, if you have a good supervisor, you know, they'll care about your health. But, like, you know, the upper management, I'm talking about the district managers, they don't care. They don't. My manager, like the last manager that I had multiple supervisors, but I had 2 store managers. The first manager that I had was an absolute scumbag. He was a terrible person. The second manager that I had was a decent human being, but his hands were tied. And so he couldn't go above and beyond for the workers like he wanted to because of corporate stupid policy. But it's like, you know, one of my coworkers, she said to me once, and she said that my father would always tell me, and she was a pretty older, you know, person, but she would tell me, she said, my father always said to me, if you pay somebody $10 an hour, you're going to get $10 an hour worth of work. And then that's really true. That's like, you know, one of the best statements that I've heard. Because what I've always found ridiculous about these large companies is that they pay their workers a little bit above minimum wage. Just a little bit. Or they'll pay just minimum wage. And they expect, like, 5-star perfect customer service. Like, perfect. And, I never understood that logic. I never understood that, like, and look, I'm not saying that by paying somebody a little bit above minimum wage, they're gonna slack off. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that if you pay somebody a little bit above minimum wage, they're not going to go above and beyond. So they're going to do, you know, what they have to do. They're going to do their tasks. But don't expect them to do more than that, because there's no incentive. So this is, you know, exactly what I was saying. When people think it's ridiculous, the comparison and make communism to retail. But when you really think about it, it's like, you know, almost everyone in the retail environment is making a very similar, you know, wage. Supervisor and the cashier. Maybe the manager is making more, obviously. Manager has a salary typically, but the cashier and the supervisor, the bulk of the store, are making almost the exact same wage. The supervisor is only making like $1 more than the cashier, and they have so much more work, and so, you know, they expect more work for barely in a reward. And so that's, you know, that's what I'll say about that. Over here, what, 2 miles to this place. I do not have you added, but I will send you a request. My friends list is private, so I'm gonna have to send you one later. I'm Polish Mercenary Nick. Thank you for the, how's the stick drift? I don't have it anymore. I got a new, well, when I'm visiting my parents in New York, there's a different controller that I have here that doesn't have that. Oh, it was. Okay, Mario. Hey, Pro, is thievery inherently bad? Yeah, typically, because, you know, you're taking something that's not yours. However, though, what I will say is that there are times when, you know, people have no choice but to, you know, steal. Like, you know, a perfect example of, like, you know, people stealing because they have no choice is, you look at the French Revolution. If you look at, like, the French Revolution, do you know what happened? Like, people think, we have economic inequality today, don't get me wrong, but, you know, if you compare it to, like, Royalist France, for instance, like, Royalist France was one of the worst forms of economic inequality you could have, where you had, like, you had wealthy aristocrats, like, you know, the rich nobles and the rich or French elite, and they were living in their palaces, chateaux as they called them, and they were, you know, having these lavish, like, you know, dinners and everything like that, while the French, you know, peasantry just starved. And the reason that there was such starvation, the reason that the poor French were starving so much, was because the king of France, King Louis XVI, decided to raise taxes on the poor. So he raised taxes on the poor and basically slashed all taxes on the rich. That's what King Louis did that in France. That's what caused the French Revolution, at least a huge amount of it. So the poor were referred to as the third estate, but the third estate was also the merchants and the farmers, so they were in one class together. But then you had the aristocracy, which were first estate, and then the clergy was the second estate, I believe. But, you know, basically, the aristocrats were paying virtually no tax, and they were throwing these lavish parties where the peasants were paying, you know, all the taxes in the country. So the mighty French Empire, their entire tax revenue, most of it was being funded by poor peasants. That's where the French Empire got the majority of its tax revenue from. And so what basically happened, the starvation, how that happened was the farmers were part of the third estate, meaning that they had to pay higher taxes. And so you had a family tax, you had a church tax, you had an income tax, you had a land tax, it was just a monarchy tax, I believe. There's just so many taxes in France. And so what happened was the taxes on the farmers were so high that the farmers weren't making any profit. They weren't making any money if they tried to ship food to the city. So if you were like a French farmer and you were being taxed to hell, if you tried to take your crops and you tried to take it to like Paris, you tried to put your crops on like a wagon and take it to Paris to sell it in the city, you would either break even or lose money. Because the amount of taxes that you were paying, it was not worth the trip that you were taking to the city. You would make no money. And so a farmer, you can't blame the farmers for that either, because the farmers have to make a living. And if they're not making any money from that, you know, there's no reason for them to also send it. And so what happened was, instead, the farmers started selling locally. They stopped selling to the cities, and they only sold locally. And what happened was that caused starvation. Now Paris had no food, because Paris, the food was coming from the farms. And because the taxes on the farmers were too much, the farmers weren't selling in the cities, because it wasn't worth it. And so the peasantry starved. The aristocrats always had food, the rich always had food, but the peasants didn't. And so that's why the peasants were so violent in the French Revolution. A lot of people don't understand this. They don't understand. They look at the French Revolution and they say, you know, why were the French so violent in the French Revolution? They say, you know, why did they cut people's heads off? Why did this not happen in America? America's revolution was peaceful, but France's revolution was so violent and bloody. There's a big difference, because the reason that the American Revolution was based on social reasons. It was based on social reasons. People in America wanted change. You know, people in America didn't feel like they were represented by the British Parliament, because Americans did not have a seat in the British Parliament. So basically in America, we were taxed, and we didn't have a say in the British government. And we weren't even referred to as British. We were referred to as the colonists, which was a very, you know, disrespectful term. You know, a lot of the British, they said, you're the colonists. That's how they would call them. So if you were American back then, and you tried to call yourself British, they would say, no, you're a colonist. And so, you know, Americans wanted change. We were tired of that, and we were pissed off, and that's, you know, what happened. The American Revolution was caused. But even though we were pissed off, do you know what we weren't? Americans weren't starving for the most part. We weren't starving. You know, the George Washington's army, when they were up in New York, were starving. That is true. But the American public, the colonists, for the most part, weren't starving. We had food. We were pissed off with the British Crown, sure, but we weren't starving. In France, they were starving, and that's the difference. That's why the French Revolution was so violent, because it was the starvation. People were desperate. People didn't have anything. And so, you know, imagine being like a French peasant back then, and imagine paying so much taxes to the government. You pay all the taxes, and you work so hard. You work 6 days a week in the fields. You work in the fields all day long, you know, putting all these crops. You're destroying your health, and you come home to try to feed your family. You try to feed your wife and kids, and you can't put food on the table, and you're watching your wife and your child starve to death. And then you see like the rich elite, the noble aristocrat in their big, you know, palace, and they have all the food they can want, and they have wine and cake and everything else that they don't need, and you're starving. And you ask yourself, you know, why am I starving? Why do they have everything and I have nothing? And so that's why the French Revolution was so violent, because people got really pissed off. They got really angry, and they saw all these rich elites, and they had everything, and the poor had nothing. And that's why they got so violent. That's why they killed a lot of the aristocrats. That's why they sent them to the guillotines, because the public got really angry. And so this that same violence in France, it's not exclusive to France. That same violence would have happened everywhere. Any country that went through the same economic hardships that France would have happened. If America experienced the same thing as France, that our revolution would have been just the same. The exact same thing actually happened in Poland, my parents' country. Poland, they also cut off, the heads of the aristocrats because the aristocrats were, living lavish, lifestyles. But like, a lot of people who like, defend the monarchy, they'll say, for instance, that like, they'll make statements and they'll say like, it was like a plot by the bourgeoisie and all this other stuff. But the reality of it is, the violence that happened in France. Do you know who I blame primarily for that violence? The heads getting cut off and all the other stuff. You know who I blame for that? I blame the monarchy and the aristocracy. I blame them primarily for that. The revolutionaries have fault too. They're not saints either. Some of the revolutionaries are really bad people. They killed a lot of people. But the primary blame for the violence in the French Revolution can be blamed on the French monarchy and the aristocrats, because they allowed that economic hardships to happen. They allowed the poor to starve. The poor got really mad, and there was a violent, revolution because of that. When you starve there's two things that make the public really angry. Two things. The best way to, that make the public angry. Raising taxes and no food. But when you combine both of them, high taxes and no food, then you're literally, it's a powder keg. It's basically going to explode. And so that's exactly what happened to France. And now going back to your comment previously, I know it's a long explanation, but now when you were asking me, like, is stealing right? Is it always bad? It depends on the situation. Inherently it's a bad thing, because you're taking something that's not yours. But if you're like a peasant, for instance, in like royalist France, and you have nothing, and you're starving, you're going to take what you can from the rich to survive, to feed your family. So that's it. Was the stealing justified in the French Revolution? Perhaps. But that's like, you gotta look at the broader picture. Like, they were stealing, to feed their families. So it's like, it's not just somebody stealing just to rip somebody off. And that's like, that's why it's, complicated. But like, a lot of people don't understand the French Revolution. That's why, personally, the French Revolution is like my favorite subject in history to read about and research, because it's just like I personally find it's such like an interesting time period of like, the social change that happened. And a lot of the stuff that happened, we sold everything here. But yeah. Do I think the French Revolution was justified? For the most part, I do. I don't think the violence was justified, but I think it was the aristocracy and the monarchy who they caused the violence and stuff to happen. What I'll say is that the way it's portrayed in Assassin's Creed Unity, the way that the French Revolution is portrayed, I thought it was pretty accurate. It was pretty well done. The conspiracies, the violence, the bloodshed, and just all of that stuff. Let me see here, super chats. How was your Thanksgiving? My Thanksgiving was good. Thank you. I am that. Thank you for it. I can't find you, so you have to add me, and I will play with you next stream. Also, apparently, there are protests in China against this Communist Party. Yeah, I heard about that. There's protests right now in China against the Communist Party because of the lockdowns. There's like in China, they're like doing these crazy like lockdowns, and they're also. I heard that there's also COVID camps in China, which that's like that's scary. Like I don't know too much about that. I just heard about it recently. But I really hope that that's not true. But it would honestly not surprise me from the Chinese government, for something like that. So I'd have to read a little bit more about that. But yeah, it's like but those people are taking a massive risk. Like protesting in China is dangerous. It's not safe to do that. That's putting a target on your back basically. But they're brave. People are tired of the regime. What's your opinion on China setting up police stations in other countries? You want to know what I think about that? What I think about that is every single, Chinese operative who sets up like a police station in any country should be arrested. Tried, and given the biggest punishment that they can possibly give. The Chinese government has zero authority to enforce any kind of its law on a foreign soil. Zero. None. And so that personally pisses me off. I know what you're talking about, the Chinese police. And for people wondering, the Chinese sent police into other countries. So they'll look for people from other countries that left their country. If you're like, and China is not the only one that does this. North Korea does this as well. North Korea actually does kidnappings. People don't know that. But North Korea will actually kidnap people who run away from North Korea. So they'll send North Korean agents into like another country like South Korea, and they'll kidnap people in the middle of the night. That hasn't happened for some time, but it's happened before. If you are like if you're like a North Korean refugee, you're just like a regular, you know, working class person, and you escape across the border, for the most part, they're not going to come after you. But if you are some, like, you know, massive political activist, like you're like a general or something like that defected, or you're like, you know, or you go on YouTube and you have like a whole channel dedicated to like, you know, criticizing North Korean government, and you're from North Korea, you have a massive target on your back. Like, there's that North Korean YouTuber, what's her name, Yunomi Park, you know, they definitely, you know, have her in she's definitely a target for them, definitely, and she knows that. She's not stupid. She knows that they're possibly after her, so she also has a risk of being taken. Yeah, the North Korean government have done that before. They kidnap people, and for the Chinese police, you know, there was this Chinese human rights activist. He was, I think this was in the Netherlands, correct me if I'm wrong, I was reading the story like a few weeks ago, and so the guy, he was basically getting these phone calls and these emails from this guy that was claiming he was from the Chinese police, and he was telling him that he needs to come in for an interview. This is in the Netherlands. And so, he tried to give the phone number to the police to trace it, but the police couldn't trace the phone number. And so eventually he gave, like, he set up, like, a meeting with the guy in, like, a public place, and the police came and arrested the guy. You know, there was also another incident where, this happened in Great Britain, like, a few weeks ago. There was, like, I think it was a Hong Kong protester who was in front of the Chinese embassy in Great Britain, and the Chinese embassy people actually went outside of the embassy and actually went on the street and started, like, ripping up all the protest signs against the Communist Party, and they dragged one of the protesters inside the embassy and beat the crap out of him. So they actually dragged the guy into the embassy. And what a lot of people don't know is embassies... Oh, what did I just join here? I think I joined a race by accident, my bad. What a lot of people don't know is that embassies are actually the foreign soil of a... Embassies are actually the foreign soil of another country. So even though, if you see, like, the Chinese embassy in, like, you know, America, for instance, that's technically land of the Chinese government. So that's, like, this, maybe, it's not a lot of land, but it belongs to the land of the country. That's what a lot of people don't know about embassies. And so when they dragged that protester into the Chinese embassy, there was an international incident because of that, and they beat him up. They couldn't do that. They can't do that. And so, do you know what actually happened? The British police officer actually crossed into the Chinese embassy and actually stopped them and got the guy safely back across into Britain. And so the British police officer deserves a raise for doing that. He put himself at massive risk, but he deserves a raise for that. That was definitely like, deserves a promotion, some kind of reward for that. But that police officer did a really good job. I saw the video. The Chinese government was outraged. They were like, you know, how does the British police officer, you know, come into our, you know, embassy? You just dragged a protester from Britain into your embassy and beat the crap out of him. The police officer has every right at that point to go into the embassy and, you know, and save him and retrieve him back. But the thing is, though, the people that beat him up are facing no charges because they have diplomatic immunity. So that's like, that's that. But, yeah, so just, you know, keep that in mind about embassies. But that's like, you know, any Chinese police in other countries should be arrested. You know, they have no authority. There's no right to do anything like that whatsoever. And honestly, I'm personally so scared of these threats from the Chinese government. I can't take them. It's disgusting, and they constantly threaten people all the time. You know, you don't like, you do what we do, or this and that, and blah blah blah. It's always that. And the thing is, what disgusts me personally is how they pressure Western companies. So you have like large Western companies that give in to the demands of the Chinese government. Like, one company is Activision, like the people who make Modern Warfare, well, the publisher for Modern Warfare, they gave in to the Chinese government. A lot of people don't know that. Basically sorry, I'm still a little sick. What they basically did, they had like some event, I think it was for World of Warcraft or something else, it was like a few years ago. And there was like one player, he was I think from Hong Kong, he won the tournament, this was like live, and he said free Hong Kong at the end of it. What happened was Activision then denied that person his prize money. Even though he won the tournament, he was entitled to the prize money. And Activision had claimed, we don't allow political statements. That's what they were claiming. But I highly doubt that. If they made any kind of other political statement, I think they would have allowed it. Because it was the Activision was probably worried about getting canceled in China, and they were probably worried about China completely banning them from China, because if a large corporation doesn't do something that China wants, they ban that company, completely blacklist it from ever operating in China. They do it really quickly. It's not just like it's not like in America where you would we don't really blacklist companies, but if we did, there's a process for doing that. We'd have to have a vote. We have to go through the House, Senate. You know, the president would possibly have to sign it if we want to ban a company from operating on our shores. But in China, they can just do that 1, 2, 3, like a day or two. And so that's like that's probably what Activision was like was probably scared of, but it's not right. And the thing about it is that, you know, this is exactly what I say when you know, I have dumb people that, like, I read comments from dumb people all the time, and they say, like, you know, corporations are there to make money. It's all about what makes money, professional. You know, why are you pissed off at them and stuff like that? There's more to making money. Sure, they're a corporation. They make money, but there's more to that. There's something called principles, and unfortunately, a lot of people don't have principles anymore. But that's basically what it is. You have principles, and you have to stand up for what's right, even if that's not profitable. What's standing up for what's right isn't always what's going to make you the most money, but it's what's right. And so, like, it's just that just, you know, stuff like that just personally, you know, can disgust me so much. And so, like, you know, you know, YouTube was not, YouTube is banned in China. It's not allowed in China. But even if YouTube was, you know, was allowed in China, I'd still criticize the Chinese government. I don't care. I don't care if they ban me in China or something like that. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. You know, I'm not gonna allow some, like, you know, Communist Party garbage to, like, you know, dictate to me what I can and can't say, and tell me that I can't say that Taiwan is a country, or criticize their, you know, their horrible human rights record, or, you know, something like that. They can honestly go screw themselves. So that's my whole thoughts on this. But, like, you know, people have to have principles, and unfortunately, so many people don't, and companies don't have principles anymore. And so, I just personally think it's like, it's disgusting. And honestly, if I was, like, president, and I hate politics, but if by some chance I was president, and I found out that there was, like, some large corporations that were, like, giving in to the demand of the Chinese government, I'd find some way to punish them. I would. Like, if I could get some law through or something like that, I'd tax these companies or do something like that, I'd punish them. Some way, if I could legally punish them, get some law passed or something like that for, like, you know, giving into the Chinese government and, like, you know, just shedding American values for just money, I'd do it. If I could punish them, I'd do it in some way legally if I could do that. But that's like, that's the thing. And even our government, like, even our government in America, like, they won't do anything. Like, these large corporations are just, like, in league with the Communist Party of China, and they don't do anything about that either. So that's like, that's just, you know, what I'll say about that. Probably enough to me talk about the Communist Party of China, but I made multiple videos talking about, you know, the Communist Party of China. Check out my crazy current events series. I made multiple videos on the Communist Party of China. Probably the most ridiculous video that I ever made about China was probably, I made a video like 2 years ago where there was this guy in China who he was from China originally, but he lived in Germany, and so he's a German citizen. He was actually an opera singer, and he got censored in China. You know what he got censored? His face got censored. So it's not allowed to show a photo of him, a photo or a video of him. But he's not even a political person. He doesn't talk politics at all. But why is his face blurred out in China? The reason his face is blurred out in China is because he looks like the Chinese president. He looks like Xi Jinping. And so because this guy looks similar to the president of China, they banned his face from any kind of pictures in China. So even though he's an opera singer, you can't find videos of him, you can't find photos of him. Just look it up. You know, opera singer gets censored in China for his face. That's like one of the most ridiculous forms of censorship that I've ever heard. Because you look too much like another world leader, they're gonna censor your face. That's the stupidest. But that is literally what we're dealing with when I say the communist. That's like that's how unreasonable and ridiculous the Communist Party of China is. And, like, you know, people tell me I'm going too far. They tell me I'm being too ridiculous. But no, you know, that's like it. I'm so happy I don't live under that government. And, you know, and I love the Chinese people. I love Chinese culture. But I cannot stand that, you know, the Communist Party of China. I just can't. It's just, you know, for me, disgusting. And it's just not, it's just ridiculous. You know, my parents grew up under communism, and that's, you know, another thing personally for me why I don't like it. But it's just, you know, the censorship. I'm a big free speech guy, and I just cannot personally take censorship. I can't take, and I just cannot take silencing people you don't like. And I think people should have the right to say what they want, even if it's, you know, even if it's wrong. I think it's up to the public, it's up to the people to decide on what's wrong or not. People should be their own fact checkers. They should decide on their own if something is right or not. Not, you know, not let some government agency or, you know, political party censor this or that or decide for them, well, what's true or not. People should decide on their own, do their own research, look up their own facts, and then decide on, you know, what's true or not the government. But but that's my whole view on that. I would consider visiting China one day, but if the Chinese Communist Party is gone. Until then, no, not gonna visit it. And all I need to do is look up my YouTube videos, I would visit, and I'd have problems. So that's just that's it. I would visit Taiwan though. Taiwan I'd gladly visit, not mainland China though. Hong Kong probably not, because Hong Kong maybe I would have visited years ago, but not anymore because of just what they've done. So this see here, I think I missed a few super chats. I hate how protesting for better wages and working conditions are considered commie bullcrap in that recent Mafia 2 video uploaded. Oh, well, you're talking about the Godfather 2 video. Yeah, but, I saw, like, one comment where people were saying that I was criticizing strikes. I wasn't criticizing strikes. I was just saying that the Castro infiltrator in the game had caused the strike. But I support strikes. I support the general right to strike. I think it's like a basic worker's right to strike. The point that I was making is that earlier is that in all communist countries, striking is illegal. It's not allowed. Where in pretty much all Western capitalist countries, striking is actually allowed. So you claim to be a party for the Communist Party. I'm not saying you specifically, Victor, but I'm saying communists, they claim to be for the working class. But yet, why is striking not allowed? Why are you not allowed to walk out on strike if that's a basic worker's right? So that's just that. When I see like the Communist Party of China claim that they're for the working class and for workers' rights, and I hear about sweatshops in China, yeah, no. So that's like no. It's just I honestly wish I wish American companies wouldn't make so much stuff in China. That's what gives them so much power over us politically. But yeah. And there's a lot of YouTubers that are unfortunately scared to say anything. They're scared to say anything against the Communist Party of China. They're scared to talk about anything. Can you wish my brother Michael a happy birthday? He liked your video, so thank you for the super chat, Scott, and happy birthday to your brother Michael. Thanks, man. Hey Pro, I just finished your Saints Row review. If you played the recent Borderlands games, you'll see Gearbox is pretty woke. They may keep it cringe. Well, look, I have I don't know Gearbox. I think they make Borderlands, right? Am I right on that? But I have no problem with like a diverse set of characters. Playing as a female character, perfectly fine with that. My issue with it is I just think the characters were like, the most massive cringe in the game, and I don't want to see any politics. Like, I just don't like politics being mixed in the video games. Like, I have no issue if it's fictional politics. If it's like some fake politics, like, the fictional corrupt politician, like in GTA, fine. But I just personally don't want to see any real world, like, politics or, stuff like that being put into a game. But, I don't know what the developers were thinking. Like, the developers in, like, the Saints Row reboot, like, they gave us, like, college kid hipsters, basically, and they thought this is what gangsters are like, apparently now. And the Saints Row community, community manager, when she was saying that times have changed and the Saints with them, no. Have gangs changed? In the last 10 years, have gangs changed? No. Have gangsters somehow become, like, college hipsters? No. A street gang is no different 10 years ago than what it was today. Like, there's no difference, if anything, if anything, the only difference is street gangs now use smartphones. That's probably the only difference. That's it. There's no, like, there's literally no difference between, like, a gang 10 years ago and a gang today, and so they're thinking that, like, modern day gangsters, or, but basically, it's like I said in my review, the Saints Row characters in Saints Row 1 and 2 are an actual gang. The characters in Saints Row the reboot, it's like what happens if Twitter users form a gang. Pretty much what it is. That's just that's the way I interpret it. At least that's the way that I saw it. But it's like they were a joke, We had a great diverse set of characters in Saints Row 1 and 2. We had Johnny Gad, Dex, Julius, Troy, Lynn, Carlos, Pierre, Shaundi. We had such great characters. And the original Saints Row cast was so good. There was not one bad character in those games. Not one. Even the villains. All the villains were interesting. Every single one of them. Even the Rollers, which the Rollers were the least popular gang in Saints Row 1, even the Rollers had a pretty interesting, like, Rollers, like, Price wasn't that interesting of a character, but Donnie was a pretty interesting character, and then Sharp, Price's uncle, that guy was pretty scary. He was, a pretty significant character, that guy was a psychopath. So it was like, all the characters were always well written, they were all interesting, but it was just, you know, and then, like, how could you have such a great diverse set of characters in, like, Saints Row 1 and 2, and then just mess it up in, like, Saints Row 2, and, like, we went in Saints Row 1, we literally, we dressed up as Vice Kings with Johnny Gat, and we caused a bunch of chaos. We literally drove around with Johnny firing RPGs at, like, corrupt cops, in Saints Row, 1. And then in Saints Row 2, we shot up a casino with Johnny. And then in the Saints Row reboot, do you know what we do in the Saints Row reboot? We went from shooting up a casino to Johnny to getting a Happy Meal with Kevin. That's what we went to. Yes, and yes, there is an actual mission in Saints Row, the reboot, where you have to get a Happy Meal. That's an actual mission for that. I'm not joking on that. It's an actual mission. It's like Kevin calls you in the mission, and he says to you, he's like, boss, we got an emergency. I need to talk to you now. You drive over there, and Kevin says, you know, the limited edition Mecha Burger toy is coming out. I want to get my kids' meal. Like, that's literally what you have to do in the mission. You have to take them to the drive-thru, and then the toy gets stolen by, like, a bunch of, like, idols, and then you have to go and get the toy. That's what we have in the Saints Row reboot. That's what you're calling over a gang boss for that? Like, imagine what would have happened if, like, imagine if Pierce called up the boss in Saints Row 2 and said, you know, boss, I got an emergency, we gotta go get a Happy Meal. How would the boss in Saints Row 2 react? I don't think the boss would be too happy about that. I think there might be some punishment over that. I don't think he'd kill Pierce over that, but I don't think he'd be very happy over that. So it's just, you know, that's just, you know, that just alone there shows you just, you know, they didn't know what they were doing when they wrote the story in, like, the reboot. I don't know what they were thinking. They ruined it, unfortunately. And, you know, and one thing I will say about the Saints Row reboot, guys, is I did break one of my promises, because I made a promise that I wouldn't play the Saints Row reboot. And unfortunately, I did break that promise. But the reason that I broke that promise, and the reason I decided to play the Saints Row reboot, is because I wanted to keep an open mind. Because people, like, I saw all these comments of people telling me, like, you know, keep an open mind, professional, keep an open mind. Like, I saw these comments, like, when I was, you know, talking about the Saints Row reboot and how stupid it looked. Like, I saw these comments of people saying, keep an open mind, give the game a chance, give the game a chance. And so I said, okay, fine, I'll give the game a chance. I didn't think it was fair for me to constantly bash the game without playing it. And so I decided to buy the game, play it, even though I said I wouldn't. I decided to play the game, give the game a chance, and just play it through start to finish. And not only did I play it through start to finish, I did all the activities in the game. I wanted to do everything I could in the game to at least give the game a chance. And I was hoping. I didn't go in the review, I didn't go in playing the game, I didn't go into it hating it. I went into it wanting to give it a chance. I wanted to like it. And there were some parts of it that I liked, some parts I did enjoy. In my review, I talked about that. Like, I liked the Criminal Ventures. I think Criminal Ventures were cool. That's a good part of the reboot. Well, that's only one good part of the reboot. You know, you have the cringe story. You have the terrible characters. You have the glitches. You have, you know, the city design. You have the gangs. The gangs suck. Like, you know, it's not good. It's the worst Saints Row. I used to think that Saints Row 4 was the worst one, but like, I honestly prefer the superpowers and the aliens over this. Like, I'd rather play as like President superpower boss than play as cringe boss, because that's exactly what boss is in the Saints Row reboot. It's cringe boss. That's pretty much what it is. So that's you know, that's my view on the whole thing. I'm sorry if I sound like a hypocrite, guys. I know I broke my promise for not playing the Saints I said I wouldn't play the Saints Row reboot, but I wanted to give it a chance, and so that's why I ultimately decided to play it, and that's why I wanted to make my review. I wanted to make my review to totally break down the game, and to, you know, warn people about it. You know, warn people who are unsure of buying the game, basically, just so they know what's in it. And, you know, and I know my review was so long, but the reason my review was so long was because I'm a very passionate Saints Row fan, and so I've played every single Saints Row game, every single one. And my favorite Saints Row has always been Saints Row 2. I still think Saints Row 2 is the best one, and so for me, it was just personal. Like, if it was just like some random game, if it was like some other game that wasn't even called Saints Row, like, you know, I wouldn't have been as pissed off. But because it's like, it's the Saints Row series, and I feel like they tarnished it. I feel like they completely ruined it. I think Saints Row is gone. It's dead. And it's just, that personally pissed me off. It irritated me a lot. And it, yeah. I was not happy about it, and, it was just that. And if you want to know how much I love Saints Row, I'm not a Saints Row hater. I think Saints Row 2 is the best video game I've ever played. And it's not an exaggeration for me, it really is. If you ask me what my favorite game is, I will tell you Saints Row 2. Saints Row 2 is my favorite video game of all time, 100%. And I think Saints Row 2 is such a good game. I think it's better than the GTA games. I think it is. GTA is awesome. It's a great game. But I think Saints Row 2 is better. Because Saints Row 2 let you do so many other things. The customization in Saints Row 2 was way better than any customization we've ever had in a GTA game. We had penthouse crib customization, the character customization, we had the voices for the characters, we had all the activities. The activities in Saints Row 2 were way better than the activities in GTA games. Because in GTA we had like the firefighter, the paramedic, and stuff like that. Now it's boring. Like it was more like a tedious task you had to do to like get like 100% completion. It's not like you didn't go into paramedic like wanting to do it. And paramedic is like one of the most hated activities in like the old GTA games. So like we didn't go into paramedic like wanting to do it for fun. Nobody plays paramedic for fun. They play it for the trophy and to get 100%. But in Saints Row 2 we had insurance fraud, which people played to complete the activity. People played it for fun. We had Mayhem, causing chaos. Mayhem was way better than Rampage. Way better. They expanded on it. We had the Hitman activity. The Hitman activity was really fun, where you go to the area and try to find a target. There was just so many activities. The activities were just so superior to the activities in GTA. So that's just what I've always felt. I always felt Saints Row 2 for me was like the best gangster game of all time. I don't think any other gangster game will beat Saints Row 2, and at least not for a very long time. Maybe GTA 6 will beat Saints Row 2, but I still am convinced that the best gangster, the best crime game, best open world crime game of all time is Saints Row 2. I'm still convinced on that, and nothing's gonna change my mind, at least until a new game comes out. Maybe GTA 6 will change my mind on that. Maybe GTA 6 will be my favorite game, but we'll have to wait and see. But for right now, Saints Row 2 is still my all-time favorite game, and nothing's gonna change that. Would I consider making a Fallout playthrough? Thank you, the expert. Yes. I might play Fallout 3 one day. If I play Fallout 3, it'll be, if I play Fallout 3, it will be Fallout 3, because Fallout 3 is my favorite Fallout game. I don't, most people, their favorite Fallout game is Fallout New Vegas, but Fallout 3 is my favorite one, because I just like the dark and gloomy feel of Fallout 3. Like, Fallout 3 feels for me like a true nuclear apocalypse game. Fallout New Vegas is a nuclear apocalypse game, and Fallout New Vegas is like more cheerful, it's more joyful, where Fallout 3 is like depressing, dark, and just sad and disturbing. And so that's what I like about Fallout 3, just that creepy atmosphere of the Capital Wasteland. And so that's why Fallout 3 was always my favorite one, personally. I also like that Fallout 3 you can play after the ending. You can't do that in Fallout New Vegas. The Australian state of Victoria had the world's longest lockdown because of a quarantine mistake caused by the state government. The premier behind this government still got re-elected, though. Oh. Well, I didn't know about that, Mario. Thank you for the super chat. That's really unfortunate. How you feeling? I hope you're feeling better. Plus Pro Saints Row were the third is way better than the Saints Row reboot. Yeah, Saints Row the third is better than the reboot, definitely, 100%. I might actually go back to playing Saints Row the third because I still have to play the DLC story. So I might end up replaying that again on a playthrough. But yeah, they messed up with the reboot. They did a really bad job. Politicians in America get nice checks from the Communist Party of China to do their bidding. Yeah, that's well, it's not just in America. There's politicians around the world that have ties to them. We need more reasonable people like you in office. Thank you, Jimmy. Thanks for the super chat. Will I see Devotion? Yes. I want to watch Devotion. We're thinking of the same movie, right? It's the Korean War movie, right? Right, Devotion. I'd have to let me look it up here. Oh yeah, it just came out. So when I feel better, I might go see the movie. Yeah, I haven't been to a movie in years, but I want to see that movie. Devotion is a Korean War movie, and it's based on a true story. What was the guy's name? Jesse Brown. And he was an African American pilot. He was one of the best pilots in the Korean War. And it's his story. And you know, the Korean War is not like a lot of the Korean War is not covered in a lot of movies and games, and so I definitely want to see it. If you know the story with like Jesse Brown, you know how it ends. It's really sad. It's but you know, if you don't know the story, you're probably gonna be in for you know, a shock. But it's I did read up about him. I didn't know about him personally, but I read, you know, the history behind him and you know, stuff, what happened to him. But I really want to see the movie still about him. So. His end is a bit sad. Can you read my other super chat, please? I could, JM. Let me go up here. Hey, Pro, do you remember No to Turban Family back? Or No to Turban Family back in 2019? No. Who is that? Turban Family back in 2019? Wait, what reward? Here, you made a super chat earlier, right? I gotta look here. I'm sorry, sometimes I talk too much and I don't get the chance to read all the super chats that come up. I always try my best to read all of them. Let's see here. How you feeling? I hope you're feeling better, Pro. Plus Saints Row the Third. Oh yeah, I read your super chat earlier, JM. I talked about Saints Row the Third. Hey, Pro, do you know anything about any Jewish revenge groups against Germans and Nazis around World War II, like the Nakam? No, I don't know. I don't know too much about that, but I do know that Israel had like a specific court set up after the war to try and like extradite like a lot of Nazis, because a lot of Nazis had escaped to places like South America, for instance. That was like a very common place that a lot of them had run away to. I know that movie Inglourious Bastards, it was like a movie, you know, 10 years old, I think. That was like a, you know, really good, like, you know, revenge movie against the Nazis. That was a pretty interesting movie. It's probably one of Brad Pitt's best, like, it was Brad Pitt in that, right? Yeah. One of Brad Pitt's, like, you know, best movies. The Need for Speed account is currently attacking people on social media like the Saints Row account did. The Star Wars account has also done the same. Ugh. I don't know, like, you know, what these I don't know what these developers think that they're gonna get by like arguing with their fans. They think more people are gonna, you know, buy their stuff. The Turpin Family in 2019. I don't know what you mean by that reward. Will the rendering be fixed in the Saints Row reboot? Probably not. They probably give it up on the game at this point, David. Are you feeling better, by the way, Pro? A little bit, JM. I think the Need for Speed account did apologize later. Well, at least they did that. The Saints Row, you know, community manager didn't. They were a very sick couple who changed their kids for years, and now they're in prison for life. I didn't hear about this couple. No problem, Fernando. Glad I can help. But I'd have to look them up. But yeah, the thing is though, the Argentinian government, if a Nazi escaped to Argentina, it was very hard to extradite them. Very, very hard. The Argentinian government would not cooperate with that at all, and so it was you know, it was a place for that they escaped to. A lot of them, fortunately. There's a really good movie about the Nuremberg trials called Nuremberg. I think it's like a 20-year-old movie, but it's like a really good one. The Turpin family was a couple who had like 15 kids There's a documentary on YouTube. They were abusive and never let their kids out and fed them poorly and never let them wear new clothes. What? My God, that would scar a kid for life. Like they would have permanent mental issues because of that. My God. I hope those parents are in prison for life for that. Ever seen Gran Torino? Yes, I did. Honestly, I think that all kids should probably watch Gran Torino. Everyone should watch it because Gran Torino actually shows like a lot of problems in like Gran Torino shows like a lot of problems in like today's society that I think is still relevant. And so Gran Torino also one thing that Gran Torino like depicts really well that a lot of movies don't get right is gang culture. Like, the way Gran Torino portrayed gang culture was perfect. Like, it was very realistic, very extremely realistic. That very similar to real-life gang culture. But basically, that's how it starts, is, like, the gang culture is that, like, typically, like, one of the gang members is, like, a family member, or, like, a friend or something like that, and then tries to get their other, their family member or friend to get into the gang, and they say, like, oh, we're here for you, we're your friends, and stuff like that, and they try to lure them into the gang. And so that that's very common. Like what was his name? How was his name in the movie? I'm trying to. I seen the movie when the movie first came out in 2008. I saw it. So I was 13 when that movie first came out. I saw it, and that was but that shows like really well like what gang culture is and like how destructive it is. Okay. Hey Pro, what do you think of Chinese companies buying US farmland? They currently own about 0.2% of American agricultural land. I don't like it, honestly. And the farmland that you're talking about, a lot of it is in North Dakota. In North Dakota, they've purchased up a lot of land, and one of the land pieces that they've purchased is like 10 miles from the, 10 miles from like a military base, or something like that. What I'll say is, sorry guys, I'm just still sick, so it's just hard for me to talk a lot of times. But, what I'll say about this is that the Chinese government will argue these are companies, but these companies have massive ties to the Chinese Communist Party, very close ties to them, and it's almost like the government of China buying up this farmland. And so people don't realize how much of a problem that is. People don't realize how big of an issue it is, and the media talks about it almost nothing. Like, you hear about the media talking about Chinese companies buying up American farmland, never hear about it. I'm sure there's some local media that cover it, but, largely in the mainstream media, it's forgotten. And people don't realize how big of a problem this is. Why is this so bad? The reason that this is so bad is because China produces the vast majority of America's manufacturing, so a lot of products, pretty much more than half of the stuff that you buy in stores, physical products, electronics, TVs, furniture, most of it is made in China, manufactured in China. So China is responsible for a lot of our manufacturing. But do you know what they're not responsible for? Our food. Our food. They don't control our food. Our food is locally grown, most of it. We do import some food from other countries. Most of our food is made locally. Made by farmers in this country. You don't want the government of China, and you don't even want any other government to control that. No other government should control that. Only American farmers should control that. And so I personally don't think that they should be able to buy up that farmland. And also, if I was like, a large American company, right? And I tried to go, and the Chinese government has argued with us over that. They said that the Chinese company should be able to buy the land. But the thing about this is, if I was an American company, and I went into China, and I tried to buy hundreds of acres of farmland, you know what would happen? They'd tell me to get the hell out of here. They would. But in our country, for some reason, I don't know why, they just allowed them to do that, and allowed them to buy up the farmland. And so you'll have people that'll argue, oh, it's free market, they can do what they want. If they want to sell the land, they can. This isn't just regular free market. This isn't regular free market real estate. This is a foreign government purchasing, and not only just a foreign government with a horrendous human rights record, buying up hundreds of acres of farmland in our country. No. So that's just, you know, I personally think it's the politicians that say, like, it's free market, you know, let them buy it. It's stupid. You know, why are we letting, like, you know, a government that has, like, that has a questionable human rights record? Like, did you ever, like, would you ever imagine, like a communist government, like, you know, 20 years ago buying up farmland in America? I would never imagine that happening, but that's apparently happening right now. Is he driving with one hand? Yes, I am. I'm actually driving with one hand right now, see? So that's like, I've gotten so good at GTA that I can actually drive, turn, stop all just with one hand. So that's how good I've gotten with the driving in this game. Anyone else need help selling anything? Hey, here. Oh, I don't get into politics, Mario. You know, I don't talk politics. This is a gaming channel. I'll talk about, like, you know, things like, you know, human rights. Human rights I'll generally talk about. Like, I'm not shy of, like, you know, my dislike of the Communist Party of China. But I stay away from politics for the most part. I don't talk about it. Respect my audience. You know, everybody has their own views. And so I largely stay away from that personally. I need help, please? Okay, invite me then. I'll help. Oh, here it is. Okay. Didn't see it earlier. Ah, damn.
That's fucked up.
I gotta make another suit outfit. Like, next time I should probably get a suit character and, like, drive around in, like, some, you know, fancy car, maybe like a sedan or something. And driving on this motorcycle for a few weeks, so try to drive something else next time. Opinion on the Trotsky assassination? Well, you know, Stalin ran Trotsky out because he wanted to concentrate his power. Trotsky was not a good man himself. Like, he supported, like, Lenin's NKVD crackdown. Or a Cheka crackdown. It was called the Cheka at the time. Get that wrong. But, basically, you know, even though Trotsky was not a good man himself, if Trotsky was in charge versus, you know, Stalin, you know, there would have been a lot less killings in the USSR. Like, you know, I'm not saying Trotsky was a good man, but if Trotsky was in power versus Stalin, you know, it would have been better. You know, there would have been a lot less terror. People wouldn't have been as scared. You know, there wouldn't have been these death squads that Stalin had around. There probably would have been, you know, political persecutions, obviously, but it wouldn't have been as bad as, you know, under Stalin, because Stalin was, you know, the worst in this regard. You know, Stalin was the most brutal Soviet leader. But yeah, that's it about Trotsky. Also, here's the thing. If Trotsky was actually leader of the Soviet Union versus Stalin, he would have been way better prepared against Germany. Like, he would have been way better prepared. Like, the thing is, though, is that, Stalin is oftentimes credited with defeating the Nazis in World War II, where for me personally, it's a combined effort. I don't think that, like, one country was able to do it alone. So people say the Soviet Union defeated the Nazis. I consider it a combined effort. I consider, you know, everyone, you know, Great Britain, America, you know, Polish government in exile, Polish, you know, fighters, French resistance, you know, there's so many countries involved in this. Like, you just list on and off, like, resistances in all the countries, like, you know, the Italian partisans, like, you know, you could just keep going on and on. There's just so many people that, like, fought against the Nazis. I personally think it's a combined effort. But my point is that what a lot of people don't understand is that one reason the USSR got invaded so badly by Germany, and this is, like, the first year of the war, like 1941, the Soviet Union was getting rolled over. Like, the first year of the German invasion, it was horrible for them. Like, they were getting rolled over. The Germans had pushed them all the way to Moscow. They got stopped at Moscow, but they pushed them all the way to Moscow. If Trotsky was in charge, I guarantee you that wouldn't have happened. You know, Germany would have still eventually invaded the Soviet Union, but they wouldn't have gotten that far. And the reason I think Trotsky would have done a much better job at stopping the Nazis than Stalin did was because Trotsky would not have purged the Soviet military like Stalin did. The reason that the Nazis were able to push so much in the Soviet Union was because of Stalin's purges. Because in the mid-30s, Stalin purged the Soviet army, and he killed hundreds of thousands of Soviet officers, like very smart people, generals, top commanders, people who were really needed for the war effort. Stalin just killed them all off. The reason Stalin killed them all off is because he thought they were a threat to his power. So anybody who Stalin suspected, and it wasn't even people that Stalin was 100% sure were plotting against him. If Stalin suspected you just a tiny bit, you were dead. Didn't matter. Didn't matter how loyal you were. If he just suspected you a tiny bit, you were done. That's how Stalin was. And so it was Stalin purged the Soviet military, the Soviet leadership, and according to Stalin's own rules, he should have been killed. He should have been executed because of just the fact that he had allowed the Nazis to just push so much in the Soviet Union. And also that, that Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, where he was completely unprepared for that. He didn't think that Germany was going to backstab him. And so that's that. So while Trotsky, to answer your question, while Trotsky was not a good man, I'm not, a fan of communism by any means, Trotsky would have probably done some political persecutions. It would not have been on the scale that Stalin had done. And so he would have been, the Soviet Union would have probably been a better place under better place, and still would have been a bad place. But would have been at least been a better place under his leadership versus under Stalin's leadership. Stalin was just a maniac. And honestly, if you want to credit somebody with, if you want to credit a Russian figure with, defeating the Nazis, don't give it to Stalin. He credited General Zhukov. General Zhukov did way more than Stalin did. If a war between the USSR and the Communist Party of China erupted during the 70s, which country would have won? That's the thing, it actually happened. That's the crazy thing. There actually was a war between China and the Soviet Union. I think it was either the 60s or the 70s when it actually happened. People actually don't know about that. But it was on the border between China and the Soviet Union. And basically, what happened was, it was that China was like claiming some island that was like part of the Soviet Union. I don't remember what the land was called, and then it started a border war. And this was not a small war by any scale. Thousands of soldiers died, hundreds of tanks were destroyed. So look that up, Chinese-Soviet War. You'll see it. It actually happened. And basically, the war was actually pretty scary, because the war could have had, very horrible results. Because what actually happened was, the Soviets had actually called the White House, so they called the U.S., and they said to the U.S., they said that if we decide to nuke China, don't get involved. That's basically what the Soviets said. So the Soviets said to the U.S. that we're planning on nuking China, don't get involved if we do. That was basically what the Soviets had said. And so the Soviets were actually considering dropping an atomic bomb on China. They didn't do it. Eventually, Khrushchev was in power when it happened. And I think Mao was the leader of China, Khrushchev was in power, and eventually they signed a treaty, and the Soviet Union gave the island to China. I believe that's how it ended. So that's how the whole conflict ended. But yeah, the Soviets actually considered using atomic bombs on China at that point. And so that's how close they were to nuclear war. And imagine that, one of the closest times that they had gotten during nuclear war wasn't even between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. It was between two communist countries, between China and the Soviet Union. So two communist countries almost nuked each other. That's what would have what almost happened. But look that up. It's pretty interesting what you can read about history sometimes. Yes, it was before the Winter War. You're right, sophistry. It was mid 1930s when it happened. Okay, let's see here. Okay, we got that. I'll help with one or two more sales, and I guess I'll probably end the stream. I'm a little tired, and so I gotta probably take my medicine soon. I'm just still really messed up and sick. It's just... Russia alone sure didn't defeat the Nazis, but their winter sure did. Yeah, winter definitely had a factor in it. I think probably the best winter was definitely on the side of the Soviets, but I think the best advantage that they had over the Nazis wasn't even the winter. It was the numbers and the manufacturing, because they were able to mobilize a much larger military, and they also their manufacturing, like their manufacturing in 1941 was garbage. But then their manufacturing, like, you know, halfway through the war, like 1943 and 1944, is actually pretty good. And they were able to get, you know, hundreds of thousands of, like, T-34 tanks out, so much military equipment. Like, the Mosin Nagant, if you look, the Mosin Nagant, the Soviet bolt-action rifle, or technically it's a Russian Empire bolt-action rifle, but it was used mostly by the Soviet forces. The Mosin Nagant, if you go to, like, a store, the Mosin Nagant costs, like, you know, somewhere around $200, $300. It used to be, like, $100 a few years ago. But the reason that the Mosin Nagant, like a World War II rifle, is that cheap is because the Mosin Nagant was the most mass-produced bolt-action rifle in history. The Soviets made 18 million Mosin Nagants. And so that's why it's so cheap, because there's just so many in circulation. But that's what Soviet manufacturing basically was. They were able to manufacture really quickly and, you know, get stuff out and, you know, get it to the battlefields quickly. The first year of the war, their, you know, manufacturing, like I said, was garbage. But then later on, there was, you know, it was much better, and it vastly improved. Yeah, that was you know, important in, like, in World War II. But yeah, but the thing is, though, at the same time is you also have to, because, you know, I hear like a lot of like you know, I hear like a lot of Russian historians, and basically what I personally cannot stand, and I personally hate, is I hate when I see historians try to downplay other countries', you know, efforts, and they also try to, you know, they try to make it seem like their effort was, like, you know, the best and everything like that. And basically what I mean by that is there's a lot of Russian historians that, like, they say, for instance, they'll say, like, it was like 80% of the Wehrmacht, which is the German army, they'll say like 80% of the German army was in the Soviet Union. And that basically, do you know what they're implying when they say that, what the Russian historians are implying? They're implying that the Soviet Union beat Germany alone. That's what they're implying when they say that. And what I'll say about this is that it was the Soviet Union. It wasn't Russia, it was the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union was the Central Asian republics, and Belarus, Ukraine, you know, Estonia, Latvia. You know, there was this Georgia, you know, Azerbaijan, Armenia. There is just Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan. You know, these countries are, and their effort is largely forgotten, you know, by the Russian historians. They try to make it seem like it's a Russian victory, when it wasn't a Russian victory, it was a Soviet victory, because it was all the countries that were involved in it. But it was also, but what I'll also say about it is that the West helped out greatly, because when the U.S. landed in France, that took away a lot of, you know, Germans that would have been on the Eastern Front fighting the Soviets. And so that was definitely, like, you know, extremely important help, and Stalin wanted that second front open. Stalin wanted that. North Africa also helped put a lot of pressure off the Soviets as well. But there was North Africa as well. So the point that I'm making about this is that World War, what I really hate is, I really hate when, like, people say that oh, that we beat the Nazis alone and stuff like that. It was a combined effort. If only one country could not have done it. It was everybody working together. This meant the Soviet Union, Poland, France, Britain, the partisans in Italy. There's just so many, like, you know, so many countries, just Czechoslovakian resistance, you know, there's this, you know, you go on and on. All the countries that were involved in the war. And it was just a combined effort. Not one country could not have done it alone. And you're also, what people also forget is people forget the land lease in which America had actually given the Soviets, like, you know, thousands of jeeps, trucks, you know, ammunition, you know, supplies, food, medical, and so that helped a lot. Stalin himself even admitted how much the American land lease had helped. So I personally don't like it when Russian history blurs that part out about all the aid that the U.S. had sent them. Like I said, it was a combined effort. And, you know, I don't think America alone could have done it. If it was just America versus the Nazis, I don't think they could have done it either. So it's just, it's a combined effort. It's every country had to working together to, like, win. I just don't like it when somebody, like, you know, one country will say, oh, we did all the work and stuff like that. No, it was a combined effort, and, you know, everyone worked together. And, you know, and then when I hear, like, the Russian historians, they say, like, you know, Russia defeated the Nazis single-handedly. Well, then my question for that is, if Russia defeated the Nazis, who defeated Italy and Japan then? Because Russia didn't defeat, the Soviet Union didn't defeat Italy. You know, who defeated Italy mostly, it was the Italian partisans, and it was the American and British forces who were in Italy. That's who defeated the Italians. So it was like, you know, they completely ignored that part, and it was, you know, who defeated the Japanese? The Japanese, it was a combined effort between China, America, Great Britain, and there was more countries. There was also resistances, like Korean resistance, you know, resistance in Indochina. There was a lot of, like, resistance in the Philippines. There's a lot of, like, you know, things. So it wasn't just Germany. It was Germany, Japan, you know, Italy. So that was just, that was that, but, you know, it's not good when, like, one country, like, you know, people try to claim that, like, yeah. People try to claim that they won, like, World War II alone. And like I said, it's a combined effort, and not one country could have done it alone. So that's just, it. What are your thoughts on the current state of Red Dead Online? Red Dead Online is a, Red Dead Online is pretty much dead. It's over. It's not gonna, you know, get any more, you know, it's not gonna get any more updates, unfortunately. It's over. Yugoslavia liberated themselves in World War II. That is true. That is actually true, Edgy. Yugoslavia is one of the few regions in Europe that actually liberated itself. The Yugoslavian partisans were probably the toughest partisans in the entire war. Like, the Yugoslavian partisans digged, like, tunnels in the mountains, and they trapped the Nazis in, like, the mountains in Yugoslavia, and they pinned them down. They were very effective. The Yugoslavian partisans knew mountain warfare very well. They knew tunnel warfare very well. And, you know, they had pretty much kicked the Nazis out themselves. So that's it. The thing is, the Soviets had actually tried to claim that the only reason the partisans had won was because of Soviet help, when Soviet help was minimal. It was minimal. It was, the partisans in Yugoslavia had, you know, liberated themselves. And so that's actually one of the things that's one of the reasons that Yugoslavia hated the Soviet Union. Even though Yugoslavia was a communist country, it hated the Soviet Union for one of those reasons. Because the Soviet Union tried to enforce its will on Yugoslavia several times, and so it was the only communist country in Europe, besides Albania, that hated the Soviet Union. So it was, okay. No, I don't hate you, Mr. Waifu. I'll look for your comment on my recent Godfather video later, Hesh. I heard Stalin tried to assassinate Joseph Tito. Yes. Tito, the dictator of Yugoslavia. Stalin had tried to assassinate him several times. Because Tito wouldn't give in to Stalin. And here's the thing about Tito is, Tito is the only man that Stalin actually was scared of. He's the only man Stalin was actually ever scared of. And what actually happened with Tito is, Tito had caught every single Soviet assassin that tried to kill him. And he even sent a letter to Stalin, and he told Stalin that we have captured 4 men already, one with a bomb and one with a rifle. I think that's what his words were. And he said, don't send any more people to kill me. If you send one more person here, I will send one person to Moscow, and I won't have to send another one. That's what he said to Stalin. And Stalin never tried to kill him again. And so that was it. Tito was the only man that Stalin was actually ever scared of. But the thing is, Tito, even though Tito did stand up to Stalin, Tito was not a good man himself. Tito did some horrible things. He wasn't as bad as Stalin, sure, but he was still a dictator, and he had camps for people he didn't like, and he killed people he didn't like too. So that was the story with Tito. But Tito was the only man that Stalin ever was scared of. And there's actually a conspiracy theory that Tito was actually the one who killed Stalin. Because there's a conspiracy theory that Tito had actually poisoned Stalin, and that's how he died. The reason the Soviet leadership would have gone along with that is because a lot of the Soviet leadership hated Stalin and they wanted him gone. So there's a chance that actually might be true, and the Soviet leadership covered it up. Do you find headlights too bright when driving? No. find them fine for the most part. What do you think of Turkey playing hardball with Finland and Sweden joining NATO? The government of Turkey has always been a bit strange. Like it's like the government of Turkey is like constantly making deals, even though it's a NATO country. It's constantly making deals with NATO and making deals with the Russian government too. But you know, they should not block, you know, Finland and Sweden's, like, you know, attempt at joining NATO, because Finland and Sweden want to join NATO, and so they should have that right if they want to. That's the difference between, you know, Russia's allies and NATO, is that Russia's allies are pretty much all allies that were forced to be Russia's allies, or they were heavily coerced into being Russia's allies, where pretty much all NATO countries are NATO countries because they wanted to be NATO countries, and the people in those countries wanted to be NATO countries. Like, you look at a country like Finland. Finland, for instance, Finland, before the Russian aggression in Ukraine, Finland was, the vast majority of people did not have a favorable view of NATO, and they didn't want to join NATO. And so it was, after the war, it jumped from, like, I think 30% only wanted to join NATO, it jumped to, like, 70% wanted to join NATO. And that's not a coincidence that it happened after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, because they border Russia. And also, Russia is a country that has historically invaded NATO multiple times in its history. And so they don't want something like that happening to them. And so I don't blame the Finns at all for wanting to join NATO. That's like, that's their choice, and that's, you know, that's, you know, they'll be safer with NATO in the end. So, but, you know, it's, you know, Putin himself is, you know, the guy who claims that he's trying to stop NATO expansion is the same guy who actually caused NATO to expand the greatest in decades because of his aggression. So, you know, this is the thing, is that, you know, if you want countries to join you, and you want countries to be your allies, you prove to other countries why they should be your allies versus somebody else's allies. You try to negotiate with countries, you talk to countries, and you show them, here's the benefits of being my ally, here's, you know, what you get from being my ally. You don't threaten countries and say, you better not be allies with them, or that. And that's, you know, that's exactly what Putin did. And so he thought that by using physical force that he was just going to scare everybody, but now, you know, now NATO is more united than it's ever been. And it's all thanks to Putin, so it's, you know, that's the biggest NATO unifier. Well, Ukraine wouldn't have been, I mean, I don't really want to talk about these current events that much, but Ukraine would not have been allowed to join NATO in the first place. And the reason that Ukraine wouldn't have ever been allowed to join NATO is because of the Donbass war that they've had. Because Ukraine did not have full control of its borders, and so wouldn't have been allowed to join NATO. And so, you know, when the Russian government says that they were in the process of joining NATO and they were going to join NATO any moment, it's not true. There was no process to join NATO. Even if there was, they wouldn't have been allowed to join NATO. It's just all nonsense. It's just propaganda that they're using to try to justify the invasion. That's pretty much what it is. It's just don't listen to that stuff. Also, last thing I'll say about this, but what I'll tell you is, the Russian government is one of the most hypocritical governments on this planet. Like, pretty much every government is hypocritical, but the Russian government is a very special kind of hypocritical, because this is actually not the first time that they've done this. They invade places a lot of times. They've done it in Georgia, in 2008, Crimea, and then they try to do referendums in those areas. And then they always claim the same thing. They claim that's the democratic right of the people to join Russia, and it's a referendum, and we're respecting the rights of the people. But here's the thing about it. Here's what I'll tell you about this. Is if you look at Russia's constitution, you look at Russia's laws, do you know what it specifically says about referendums and secession? It says that any kind of secession, any kind of referendum is considered treason against the Russian Federation state. So if you live in Russia, and you live in a part of Russia, and you think you should have a referendum to be an independent country, you just committed treason in Russia. That's how Russia views referendums in its own country. So that's the thing is, Russia, the referendums that Russia's encouraged, it's invaded places and encouraged referendums. In Moldova, there's this one part of Moldova called Transnistria, where they have basically encouraged a referendum for the area to secede from Moldova. And it's the eastern part of Moldova, and it's an unrecognized country, but it's basically a pro-Russian puppet state. That's pretty much what it is. And then in the they've done it in Georgia in 2008 referendum. They were claiming that the people want to join Russia. They invaded Georgia in 2008, and they did it also in 2014 in Crimea, and then they did referendum. They said that that you know, Crimea wants to join Russia. Now they're doing the same thing in 2022 in Ukraine. But it's like I said, if you look at Russian law, anything in regards to referendums for their own country is considered treason. So Russia will support all the referendums they want in other countries to destabilize them. They do it primarily to destabilize them and to gain more land. But they won't support any kind of referendum on their land, and they consider that treason. And so I personally, you know, ask the Russia supporters, ask them, who, you know, I see these dumb comments of people saying, oh, it's the people's right to choose to join Russia. Well, then is it also the people's right to leave Russia if they want to? Would you support referendums in Chechnya? Would you support referendums in Tuva? Would you support referendums in Dagestan? Would you support referendums in Tatarstan? Would you support referendums on the Kuril Islands? These are all parts of Russia that have secessionist movements. All of those parts of Russia that I just labeled to you guys have their own independence movements. So there's several independence movements that exist in Russia that they don't want to be part of Russia. Japan claims sovereignty over the Kuril Islands. Tatarstan is a region in Russia that actually had a referendum in 1992. In 1992, Tatarstan actually had a referendum. And 60% of the public in Tatarstan said that they want to be their own country. And the vast majority of people in Tatarstan are Tatars. So they're not Slavic Russians. And they felt they wanted in their own country. And they had a right to have their own country. But Russia basically said no. They walked into Tatarstan and they said, we're not going to respect this referendum. You're a part of, integral part of Russia. And they just said no. And they promised them some sovereignty. But then when Putin came to power, he just basically got rid of all Tatarstan sovereignty. So look that up if you don't believe me. Go on Google, type in 1992 Tatarstan referendum. It was a part of Russia that had a referendum in 1992. The vast majority of people voted to leave Russia. Russia did not respect it and used physical force to keep Tatarstan as part of their country. And so they encourage referendums in other countries, encourage secessionist movements in other countries, but then in their own country, they will not tolerate any kind of secession, any kind of referendum. It shows you the hypocrisy of the Russian state. And I wish more media would call it out, because the mainstream media, you know, they have plenty of this stuff that they don't know, but they don't talk about the history of Tatarstan or any of this stuff. Like, if you look at just Russia's history and you look at the referendums that they've done in the past, and then you look at their own laws, it's very easy to point out the contradictions. I wish there was more reporting that would actually cover stuff like this. And you could easily, you know, cover how hypocritical the Russian government is. But, you know, that, but yeah, Chechnya is actually a region of Russia that's in this, that was in the Caucasus, that declared its own independence after the fall of the Soviet Union. And the Russians had invaded it. Russia invaded it, and the first Chechen war, Chechens won. They drove the Russians out. The second war, in the late 90s, they won, and they took over Chechnya. They bombed their capital, Grozny, to the ground. Like, their capital was just completely destroyed. And so they annexed it. They made it a part of Russia. And now you have that scumbag Kadyrov there. Kadyrov, he's basically, you know, the puppet of the Russian government who runs Chechnya. That guy, you know, he says ridiculous things. He says that people who criticize him on social media should be killed. That's what the Chechen leader, you know, says. But, you know, for, you know, Kadyrov for me is like one of the biggest scumbags ever. For, like, you know, somebody that, like, you know, after the Russian government had invaded your country and destroyed your country and, you know, forced your country to be part of Russia, and you're a puppet for them? What a joke he is. He sold his own people out for personal wealth. That Kadyrov guy is like a massive scumbag. But then you have Tuva and Dagestan. These are also two other regions in Russia. And like I said, you can go on Google, look up Tuva independence, look up Dagestan independence. These are regions in Russia that want independence. They don't want to be part of Russia. And yet Russia denies their independence. They won't let them have it. And so if Russia believes in referendums so much, give the people of Chechnya a referendum. Give the people of Tuva a referendum. Give the people of Dagestan referendums. But they're not going to do that. It's only referendum. If you want to join Russia, they'll support as many referendums as they want. But if you want to leave Russia, no, you get locked up and arrested for treason. And so I wish more people, you know, these comments of these people that I see defending the Russian government, and, you know, saying, like, you know, it's a democratic right of people to join Russia. I wish they would just see the hypocrisy. And even so, the referendums that happen in Ukraine are clearly rigged. 100%. It's 100% rigged. There's no question in my mind. They didn't even try to make it legit. They didn't even try to. It's literally when it's 90% of people want to join Russia, that almost never happens. And whenever you have elections, when you have like a when you have one election steamroll another, candidate, typically a steamroll is like 70% of the vote, like at most. Like typically 70% is considered a steamroll, like a vote. A little bit over 60%, like 65% is still considered a steamroll vote. But in elections, very rarely will you have like 90%, somebody gets 90% of the vote. And very rarely does that happen. And so when it's like, 90% to join Russia, and Russia invaded and like blew up half their country, for me that's just nonsense. It's a lie. It's like I said, they didn't even try to hide that it was rigged. It's like the numbers, you can just look at it. It's clear that it was a lie. But like I said, anybody who supports Russia or anything like that, just look that up. That's all I ask you, is look that up. And I have nothing against the Russian people, but I was talking about the government. Look that up if you don't believe me. Look up the independence movements in those countries and look up what secession is considered in Russia. Look up what the Russian law is on referendums, and you'll see they consider it treason. They consider it betrayal of the Russian land. And so a lot of people don't they don't know this. They blindly defend the government of Russia, and they don't even know the hypocrisy of it. But I guess that's enough for talking about that. And also it was the fact that so many people who fled the war weren't allowed to come back to vote in the referendums. That's also you literally drove off the people on the land originally, and they can't come back to vote. And so that's just but yeah, also one more historical fact that I'll tell you guys something that a lot of people don't know about. And this is also the last thing that I'll say about this whole Russia thing. But this is also, all of this that I'm saying is true. All this on referendums. You can look it up. Look up what Russia's policy is on referendums. Look up the independence movements that Russia has cracked down heavily on. And then, if it's an independence movement to join Russia, they'll gladly support it. But if it's anything to leave Russia, they'll crack down on it and arrest everyone involved. But basically, the land of Crimea, that land. If you know the history behind Crimea, you know that it doesn't belong to Russia. 100%, it doesn't belong to Russia. You can make arguments about that it might not belong to Ukraine either, but it definitely doesn't belong to Russia. If it doesn't belong to either one, who does it belong to? Well, if you look at the history of Crimea, the Russian government has claimed falsely in their propaganda. They claim that Crimea was always historically Russian. That's not true. Do you know who actually lived on the land before the Russians and before the Crimeans? If you go back like thousands of years, was the Greeks, but there's no Greeks virtually today. But if you go back actually recent history, just under 70 years ago, do you know who actually lived there? The Tatars lived there. The Tatars, for people wondering, the Tatars are people that are from Central Asia. They came from Central Asia originally, and they moved into Eastern Europe hundreds of years ago. And so that's the backstory of the Tatars. But yeah, basically, and I say Tatars, they're called Tartars in English, but I say Tatars because that's how we say in Polish. My father is 50% Polish Tatar. But anyways, about that is what happened was the Tatars actually had their own country. They had their own country in Crimea, and people actually don't know this. So look this up. You can look up the Crimean Khanate. The Tatars had their own country in Crimea, and what actually happened was the Russian Empire ended up conquering this land, and they took this land over, and they made it part of Russia. And if you go back, if you go back to it like over 70 years ago, and you look at, Crimea 70 plus years ago was more than 50% Tatar. More than 50%. They were the vast majority of the people that lived on that peninsula. It wasn't the Russians. And what happened, do you know what happened to the original inhabitants of that peninsula? In 1944, Stalin sent the NKVD, which were based his secret police, onto the Crimean Peninsula. They took the entire Tatar population that lived on that island, and they forcibly deported them to work camps in Siberia. So Stalin had deported the entire population, the original ethnic population of that region, deported them to Siberia to work camps. Most of them did not survive the trip. Most of them died. And so he displaced the original inhabitants of the land. And then do you know what Stalin did? He settled Crimea with Russians. So he, only 70 plus years ago, the original inhabitants were kicked off the land, sent to work camps, and then the entire Crimean Peninsula was then settled with Russians. And then that's, as being a Polish Tatar, that personally pisses me off so much when I hear, like, Russians will say that Crimea was historically Russian land and it was always, part of Russia. They threw the original inhabitants off the land 70 years ago and sent them all to work camps where they died. And then they settled the land with Russians, and they're claiming the land was historically theirs. That is the biggest amount of nonsense that I've heard. And the Tatars that lived, there's a few Tatars that lived in Crimea today. Do you know who they sided with? They wanted to be part of Ukraine. They didn't want it to be part of Russia. And so that's it. Stalin brutally removed the original inhabitants off that land, killed off the vast majority of them, and then settled the land with Russians. And then the Russian government has the nerve to claim that land is historically theirs, when it's only 70 plus years ago it was owned by somebody completely different. So that's just that's the thing about Crimea. That's what the Russian propaganda, the RT and all the other stuff, they don't tell you that about that. But people don't know that. Stalin displaced a lot of people in the Soviet Union, and that was like, perfect example of that. The Dutch did the same thing with the Caribbean. Oh yeah, a lot of empires did that. A lot of empires killed and displaced people, and moved them. The Soviets were an empire as well, you could argue. But it was the point that I'm making about, like, Crimea is that is like a part of history that, like, a lot of people don't know about. They don't know about that stuff. Have I been watching the World Cup professional? No, I haven't really. Haven't been watching a lot of it. Okay, it's here. Okay. Here we go. I'm probably gonna wrap up the stream here. I'm a bit tired. I gotta take my medicine also because I'm just still really sick. I'm gonna probably have that crazy current events video either tonight or tomorrow, but I have a good one. Oh well, I'm sorry. Do you guys like when I talk history and stuff like that? Sometimes I like when people ask me questions. I like talking about it and stuff. History is like a subject that I read a lot of extensive history, and so a lot of stuff that you can you can get rid of a lot of modern day propaganda if you read the history about what actually happened and stuff. And so that's what I like. Just when I from a history perspective, and this isn't even a biased perspective, but a history perspective. If you look at the history, you can clearly tell that the Russian government is lying when they say that the land was historically Russian. 70 years ago, it was part of the Soviet Union, sure, but it wasn't Russians that were living on it. It was ethnic Tatars, and they displaced the original population on it. So that's just thing that people don't know about. Maybe stay on your stream, to be honest. Thank you. You teach better history than a high school teacher. Yeah, because I like to teach history, like, I like to teach history from, like, a very non-biased perspective. And the thing is, though, I'll tell you something, is, like, when I criticize the Communist Party of China, or I criticize, like, the Russian government, like, I don't talk politics. I stay away from, at least, my country's politics, America. That I don't discuss. But I'll talk about, like, human rights, and I'll talk about some stuff like that if people ask me. And, I read these comments. You read Russian propaganda? Yeah, I've read it because I wanted to see, like, what they say, and it's nonsense. And it's just, everything that I said to you guys, like the whole history of referendums and everything, you can disprove the Russian propaganda easily if you do your research. The problem is a lot of people don't do their research, and so they fall into the propaganda. And the issue is that, like, I have dumb people that, like, respond to me, and they say to me, like, people that'll defend China. And they'll say that I'm, like, an American puppet, or they'll, like, when I criticize, like, Putin and stuff like that, they'll say that I'm, like, a NATO puppet, or, like, dumb things like that. But if you know when I talk history, I criticize the West all the time, like, in a lot of the history that I talk about. Like, if you watch some of my playthroughs and I talk about history, I criticize horrible things the American government has done, like, in my history, like, not in my history, but, like, I don't post a lot of history videos, but when I do talk about a history subject, I'm not biased towards anything. I'll criticize everyone who I think is bad, and everyone who I think has done something stupid. I'll talk crap about everyone who I think has done something stupid. So, when people that say I'm like a American puppet or something like that, it's, if you watch a lot of my videos, you'll know I've criticized a lot of dumb things that, the U.S. has done throughout its history. So that's like, I don't even think the Iraq War was a good idea. I think that was a disaster, but, like, not to get into, stuff like that. But, You know, that. So it's like, you know, I don't know what, you know, they say I'm an American puppet when I'm criticizing, like, you know, a lot of, you know, bad things the U.S. has done historically, and I criticize the Soviet, and I criticize the Chinese, you know, for their history as well. But, you know, that's, you know, that's why, when you look at history, you gotta look at it from everything. You gotta look at it, and you gotta criticize everyone equally, because everyone, you know, does bad things. But, you know, I just can't stand it when people, like, you know, people will try to make excuses. You know, people trying to, like, make excuses for, like, Russia or something like that, or make excuses for, like, China, or even some people, like, you know, some people make excuses for, like, you know, America, for instance. Like, you know, there's dumb people who think that the Civil War was, like, fought over states' rights, when it was clearly fought over slavery. Like, if you look at the Confederate laws, if you look at their founding documents, they clearly mention slavery. But then you have people who will, you know, try to distort history, and they'll try to claim it was a struggle for states' rights. That's not true. So that's just, and this is not a left or right wing or perspective or anything like that. It's just clear history perspective. It's that, so that's just, that it was not about states' rights. It was about the Confederacy wanting to hold slaves. That's basically what it was about. But, yes, Russia did take over the Baltics in the Soviet time. I missed a super chat. I'm really sorry if I did. Let me see. Did I miss? Oh, I think I missed a few. Man, I feel really sick too. I gotta take my medicine before I go to sleep. Have you ever been in a fight at school anymore? Thank you, Antonio. I had gotten attacked once at school by this kid. It's a really long story. I could probably tell it another time, Antonio. I told it before. I got attacked by this kid in middle school. Years later, he ended up apologizing to me, and I forgave him. You know, that's that. It was basically a dumb thing. He insulted me, so I insulted him, and he got pissed off and attacked me. And that's what it was. That's what it was ultimately about. Here's to a speedy recovery, pro. I'm off to sleep. Thank you, Victor. Let's see here.
Well, no, I mean, she was a dancer for them in the 80s. No, they don't have an old-timer's name.
It's pro to cool block history, frozen facts. Thank you. What's the scene that makes you look away when a character gets killed? There really isn't much. It's really hard for me to look away, even when I play a game like Outlast. It's really hard for me to look away. But, yeah. Okay, Hash, I'll take a look at it. Your thoughts on North Korea, one of the worst regimes in the world. Yeah, but I guess I'm gonna go here, guys. If you guys love my streams, and you guys like my streams, please do drop a like. It does help me out a lot. And I will have, there's a crazy current events video that I have coming out, either tonight, or maybe tomorrow. But it'll be a video talking about, a scam that's, on the PlayStation Store. There's actually a game on the PlayStation Store that I kind of consider a scam, which I'm going to talk about that, in a crazy current events video, warning people about a game. Thank you guys, thank you guys for watching. Get plenty of rest, down a couple, eat some chicken noodle soup. Thank you. I am Batman, thanks, man. But, thank you guys. If you guys enjoyed the stream, do drop a like, and, I'll see you guys on the next one. Take care, guys. Have a wonderful day. Thank you, everyone, for stopping by. You guys are awesome. Thank you for hanging out with me. Take care, guys.